Hello there and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, where curiosity slows down, questions find space to breathe, and science drifts gently into your evening. Tonight we're not gazing at the stars or following the tick of a clock. Instead, we're heading down, far down, into a place that most of us will never see with our own eyes. It's a world without sunlight, a world where day and night lose their meaning, where survival depends on tricks of light, patience, and an endless ability to adapt. The ocean hides many secrets, but none quite like the midnight zone, that vast stretch of water where eternal darkness reigns. You might have heard it called the Pelagic Zone, beginning about a kilometre below the surface and stretching down several more. Imagine standing on a shoreline, watching the horizon, and knowing that beneath that seemingly calm surface lies an entire kingdom that dwarfs the land above. The midnight zone is larger than all the continents combined, yet we know less about it than the surface of Mars. Before we start drifting downward, I wonder, where are you listening from tonight? Maybe you're near the coast, where waves are never far from your window. Maybe you're far inland, with only lakes or rivers nearby. Or maybe the sea for you exists only as a memory of a trip long ago. Wherever you are, think for a moment about the deepest water you've ever seen. Was it a swimming pool, a clear mountain lake, or perhaps the open sea? Now stretch that depth far beyond imagination, until sunlight can no longer reach, until colours fade one by one, until only blackness remains. That's where we're going together. If you find comfort in this quiet journey, or simply enjoy having something thoughtful to drift off to, I'd be grateful if you gave this video a like or perhaps subscribed. It helps this small corner of calm reach others who might also enjoy wandering through science without urgency. But don't worry, I won't stop often to remind you. We're here for the story, and the story is waiting just below the surface. Picture the ocean as a series of layers, each one stranger and less familiar than the last. The sunlight zone, where we swim and fish and sail, makes up only a sliver of the ocean's depth. Below that, the twilight zone stretches down, dim and dusky, where some light still filters through, and where many animals rise at night to feed. But once we cross into the midnight zone, all of that disappears. No more blue water glowing faintly overhead, no more fading outlines, just darkness as complete as closing your eyes. If you were to dive down yourself, which of course would be impossible without the right protection, you would watch the last glimmers vanish above you like stars going out one by one. This isn't emptiness though. Darkness in the ocean doesn't mean lifelessness, quite the opposite. It means we're about to meet creatures that have evolved in ways so unexpected that they almost feel like science fiction brought to life. Some carry lanterns on their heads, others glow with pulsing colours, some drift with bodies so fragile they could dissolve with a touch. There are hunters with teeth so large they can't close their mouths, giants with eyes the size of dinner plates, and drifters that stretch longer than whales, yet are made almost entirely of water. The midnight zone is not empty. It's thriving with forms shaped by pressure, by hunger, by the absence of light. The descent itself is a journey worth imagining. You leave behind the choppy surface where waves break and boats rock. You pass through the first 100 metres where light still sparkles, where fish school in silver flashes, where coral reefs might stretch in bright colours. Then, as you drop lower, the colours fade. Reds vanish first, then oranges, then yellows, until even blues are swallowed by grey. At around 200 metres you've reached the twilight zone. Here, the water dims into a permanent dusk. Some light remains, enough for shadows, enough for predators to rise and hunt. It's here that lanternfish and hatchetfish flicker their lights, confusing anything that might be chasing them. It's here that the largest migration on Earth happens every night, as billions of creatures rise toward the surface to feed under cover of darkness. But we won't linger, because our journey continues downward. Past 1,000 metres, the twilight zone finally ends, and with it, all traces of sunlight. This is the threshold of the midnight zone. Imagine stretching your hand in front of your face and seeing nothing at all. Not even the faint outline. The only light now comes from the animals themselves. Bioluminescence becomes the rule rather than the exception. Tiny flashes and glows dot the blackness, like stars scattered across an invisible sky. Some of these glows are meant to attract prey, others to signal mates, still others to mislead predators. Light here is currency, lure and weapon. The pressure at this depth is immense. Every 10 meters of water adds another atmosphere of pressure, so by the time you reach 1 kilometer, the weight pressing down is more than 100 times what you feel at the surface. For us, it would be instantly fatal. For the creatures here, it's simply the background of their lives. They have bodies without air pockets, tissues designed to withstand crushing forces, and metabolisms slowed to match the scarcity of food. The silence is equally heavy. Sound travels well through water, but here it is dampened, stretched, distorted. The kind of silence that feels almost physical. What draws us to places like this? Places we cannot survive in, cannot even see without machines. Perhaps it's the sense that the midnight zone is a mirror of the unknown, a reminder that our planet still hides worlds within it. We spend so much time looking outward, to the stars and the possibility of life beyond, that we sometimes forget there are frontiers still waiting in the oceans. The midnight zone is, in many ways, an alien world right here at home. As we begin our slow drift downward into this vastness, it's worth pausing to notice how life has adapted at every step. The creatures we'll meet have been tested by hunger, by darkness, by pressure beyond imagining, and they've survived through innovation. To understand them is to understand resilience in its rawest form. And though we can only visit through cameras, submarines, and the accounts of scientists who've gone there, the midnight zone speaks to something universal. The will to endure, to create light where none exists, to find ways of living in places that seem impossible. So let's sink together, not in haste but in curiosity, past the familiar surface, through the fading colours, until only darkness surrounds us. Ahead lies a world most of us will never touch, but all of us can imagine. The midnight zone is waiting, and in its shadows, life glows. When we leave the world of light behind, the journey downward is not sudden, it is gradual, a long, slow slide into another reality. The ocean does not rush the traveller. It takes its time with you, metre by metre, dimming the glow above until it feels like the surface is part of another life. At first the descent feels familiar. The water around still holds some of the brightness of day, still carries the shapes of fish and drifting plankton. There are schools that shimmer as one, moving in unison, silver scales flashing back what little sunlight penetrates. Yet even here you can already sense change. The colours begin to shift. The vibrant reds and oranges that dominate the shallow reefs vanish quickly. Water swallows those wavelengths first, leaving everything tinted in shades of blue and green. This is the first lesson of descent. Colour is not permanent. A red fish near the surface may look striking, easy to spot, but once it slips even 100 meters down it becomes nearly invisible. What was once a bright warning turns into camouflage in the dim light. Divers sometimes take red objects with them and watch them fade to black the deeper they go. The sea edits its palette relentlessly until only blue remains, and then even that gives way to grey before vanishing altogether. Pressure builds quickly. Every 10 meters adds another layer of weight equal to the atmosphere pressing on you at sea level. By the time you reach 50 meters, your body would already feel several times heavier if not for the buoyancy of water. At 100 meters, the pressure is enough to make your lungs ache, and beyond that point, without specialized equipment, human presence becomes impossible. Yet for the life adapted to this path, there is no discomfort. Many of the fish here have bodies without air spaces, no fragile cavities to collapse. Their flesh and organs are adapted to density, to compression, to the reality that crushing weight is the baseline of existence. As we drift further down, the bright outlines of the upper ocean begin to blur. Shadows grow longer. Shapes that were once distinct turn into silhouettes, then into faint impressions. The deeper we go, the less the surface matters. At about 200 metres, we have entered the dim territory sometimes called the twilight zone. There is still light here, but never enough for warmth, never enough for photosynthesis. Plants cannot survive in this dimness, so the energy that feeds life comes from elsewhere. Some creatures migrate upward at night to feed in the shallows, then descend again by day. Others rely on whatever falls from above, a steady drizzle of particles known as marine snow, tiny fragments of dead plankton, fecal matter, bits of discarded shells, drifting slowly downward through the column. It sounds unappealing, but it is the foundation of survival for countless organisms below. The twilight zone is also where many first encounters with glowing animals occur. Lanternfish are among the most abundant creatures in the ocean, and they thrive here. Their bodies are lined with photophores, small organs that emit light. They use them in complex ways, to blend in with the faint light above so predators below cannot see their outlines, to signal potential mates, and perhaps to confuse those who chase them. These little fish, each only a few centimetres long, make up an enormous part of global biomass. Entire food webs depend on them, and every evening billions of them swim upward toward the surface in the largest migration on Earth, only to return again before dawn. Alongside them are hatchetfish, with thin silver bodies shaped like blades. Their sides reflect light in ways that make them nearly invisible. When threatened, they adjust the brightness of their own glowing bellies to match the faint glow filtering from above, a camouflage so precise it fools almost anything looking upward. Even at these depths, survival is a game of constant disguise and deception. But we are not stopping here. The descent continues. With every additional 100 metres, the light fades further, until finally, just beyond 1,000 metres, it vanishes altogether. This is the threshold where the twilight ends and the midnight zone begins. Above, there is no longer even a faint memory of the sun. It is eternal night. The shift is profound. You cannot see your own hand. You cannot see the body of a whale if it passed directly in front of you. Yet the blackness is not empty. It is punctuated by flashes, pulses and sparks. Bioluminescence becomes the language of survival. Some fish dangle glowing lures from stalks protruding from their heads, waiting motionless in the dark until an unsuspecting prey is drawn close. Others release clouds of glowing liquid, startling predators long enough to escape. Still others blink in rhythm, creating patterns that scientists suspect may be a form of communication as complex as songs or dances. Here, silence takes on a new meaning as well. Sound travels differently through dense water, and in this part of the ocean, it carries far. Many animals rely on vibrations and echoes, though not in the way whales or dolphins do nearer the surface. Here, clicks and pulses are softer, less studied, and still mysterious. For us, sinking into this silence would feel isolating, but for the creatures here it is normal. They sense changes in pressure, movement, and faint shifts in current that would escape our notice entirely. As the descent continues, the pressure grows overwhelming. At 2,000 metres, it is 200 times the pressure at the surface, the equivalent of stacking a car on every square inch of your body. And yet jellyfish drift through without strain. Squid with eyes adapted to darkness patrol the blackness. Eels with hinged jaws swim slowly, conserving energy in a world where meals are rare. Hunger defines much of the life here. Because food is scarce, many animals grow slowly, move infrequently, and develop oversized mouths and stomachs capable of devouring prey much larger than themselves. When you may not eat again for weeks, nothing can be wasted. It is easy to imagine this descent as frightening, but if you allow yourself to linger in the thought, it becomes strangely calming. No schedules, no noise of human life, only the slow drift downward, the faint spark of life around you, the weight of water pressing steadily. In such darkness, time loses some of its meaning. There is no sunrise or sunset to mark the hours. The creatures here live by other rhythms, feeding when food appears, glowing when communication is needed, resting in long stretches of stillness. The journey downward reveals another truth. The ocean is not uniform. It changes in layers, each with its own inhabitants, its own rules. By the time we reach 3 or 4 kilometers below the surface, we're deep into the midnight zone, where exploration has been rare, where submersibles have ventured only briefly. Here, animals often appear ghost-like. Some are nearly transparent, others are soft-bodied, lacking bones that would crumble under pressure. Siphonophores stretch for tens of meters, chains of small organisms working together as one body, drifting endlessly. Colossal squid lurk here as well, rarely seen alive. Their enormous eyes adapted to catch the faintest trace of bioluminescent flashes. For humans, the descent is only possible through machines. Submarines, remote vehicles and pressure-resistant cameras allow glimpses, but they are fleeting. The ocean reminds us that it does not yield its secrets easily. Yet every time one of these vessels sinks into the black, something unexpected is recorded. A fish never before seen, a glowing pattern unexplained, a behaviour that rewrites what we thought we knew. The descent is not a single act, it is a continuous revelation. With each metre, the rules of survival change. Light disappears, pressure grows, silence deepens, and the creatures encountered become stranger, more perfectly suited to the impossible environment. To imagine ourselves drifting downward into this space is to step out of the familiar world and into one that feels both alien and entirely natural. The ocean has been this way for millions of years, shaping life quietly in the dark. And as we sink further, we see that adaptation is not extraordinary here. It is simply necessary. The descent does not end in emptiness. It opens into a realm full of life, each spark and shadow a reminder that existence does not depend on sunlight. The deeper we go, the more we realise that the midnight zone is not just a place of absence. It is a place of presence, of survival, of strategies shaped by time and pressure. And with every metre downward, the story grows richer, waiting to be explored. As we continue to sink, there comes a point where the ocean seems to forget the sun altogether. The descent has already carried us through the shifting blues of the surface, through the dimming greys of the twilight, but now the last traces of daylight are leaving us behind. Above, the glow is so faint it might as well be a memory rather than a presence. Even if the surface were clear and the sun directly overhead, its power cannot reach this far. The ocean has absorbed and scattered the light, leaving only darkness. For us, light is the rhythm of life. Our days are measured by it, our clocks tied to the rising and setting of the sun, our bodies are tuned to cycles of brightness and shadow. Down here, none of that matters. The creatures that live at these depths have no sunrise to guide them, no sunset to signal rest. If they sense time at all, it is through the faint rise and fall of food drifting down, the occasional encounter with a predator, or the cycle of their own inner rhythms which may bear no resemblance to the patterns we know above. Light fading to nothingness does not mean the end of vision entirely, though. Many of the animals here have developed eyes so large, so sensitive, that they can detect the faintest flicker of bioluminescence. Imagine living in a place where the only brightness is what other creatures produce. Every flash, every glow, every faint shimmer is both signal and potential danger. For us, darkness is something we rarely experience. Even at night, our cities and towns are lit. Even in the countryside, the stars scatter overhead. True darkness is foreign, and yet here it is the default state. As the last remnants of daylight disappear, our sense of distance changes. At the surface, light defines space. We see far across the horizon, judge the shape of clouds, follow the shadows of mountains. In the fading twilight of the sea, depth perception begins to fail. Objects appear only when they are close, and sometimes not until they touch. In total darkness, there is no horizon, only blackness surrounding in every direction. The mind struggles to picture it because we rely so heavily on sight to anchor our sense of place. This fading of light has consequences for colour as well. At shallow depths, reds are bright, oranges stand out, yellows glow warmly. But even at just a few dozen metres, red disappears, swallowed by the water. By the time we reach this zone, nearly all colours have vanished except faint blues. For creatures that evolved in shallower waters, this would mean disadvantage. For those that belong here, it offers protection. Many deep-sea animals are red, which may sound counterintuitive until you realise that red light does not reach these depths. To the human eye, and to the eyes of most predators, red appears black in this darkness. An animal glowing crimson in shallow water becomes a shadow here, hidden by the very colour that once betrayed it. Others take advantage of the absence of light by becoming nearly transparent. Glass squid, crystal jellyfish, and delicate shrimp allow the water to pass right through them, their organs and bodies almost invisible. For them, fading light is an ally. Without shadows to cast, without colours to betray them, they vanish into the darkness like ghosts. When the last memory of sunlight fades, another light takes its place. Bioluminescence becomes the dominant source of brightness, though calling it brightness may be misleading. It is more like sparks in the distance, brief flickers, soft pulses. Some animals create constant glows, others flash in bursts, and some can control the patterns of their lights with precision. Anglerfish use dangling lures, waiting motionless until a smaller fish is drawn toward what appears to be a worm or a drifting spark. Hatchetfish glow faintly beneath their bellies to erase their silhouettes. Certain squid release clouds of glowing fluid, confusing predators in ways similar to how shallower squids use ink. These lights are not random. They are language, weapons, decoys, and invitations. To live here is to master the use of light as carefully as creatures on land master the use of speed, stealth, or strength. Imagine looking upward into black water and seeing a faint flicker. Is it prey waiting to be caught? Is it a predator baiting a trap? Is it a potential mate signalling? Every encounter carries risk, and every decision can mean survival or death. When light fades to memory, sound begins to carry more weight. Many animals at these depths rely on vibrations, on subtle shifts in current, on pressure waves. The ocean is alive with low-frequency sounds, though we cannot always hear them. Some of these are produced by animals, others by distant storms, earthquakes, or ice breaking in the polar seas and echoing through the water column. Down here, those sounds travel vast distances. To us, it would be like hearing a whisper from across a continent. To the creatures of the Midnight Zone, it is simply part of their environment, a way of sensing what cannot be seen. The absence of light also shapes size in unexpected ways. Some species shrink, becoming small enough to survive with minimal energy. Others grow to enormous proportions. Giant squids, for instance, are thought to live primarily in these depths. Their eyes evolved to detect faint flashes across long distances. Siphonophers can reach lengths longer than blue whales, yet are made of delicate chains of tiny organisms, each one specialised for a particular task. The blackness does not limit size, it simply allows extremes to flourish. For humans trying to explore this place, fading light presents one of the greatest challenges. Cameras, no matter how sensitive, require artificial illumination, and that changes the environment the moment it's switched on. Creatures accustomed to faint flickers are startled, sometimes even harmed by sudden beams. The act of observing risks altering what is being observed. Submersibles descend with lights blazing, yet those lights reach only a few meters. Beyond the small circle of illumination lies endless dark. Every expedition is like standing in a spotlight on an otherwise empty stage. You see a few details, a few movements, but you are surrounded by mysteries that remain hidden. Light fading into memory does not mean absence of wonder. If anything, it magnifies it. To know that entire ecosystems exist without a single ray of sunlight is to understand that life does not depend solely on the conditions we find comfortable. It adapts, reshapes itself, and continues in forms we could hardly imagine. What feels impossible on land becomes ordinary here. Teeth like needles, jaws that unhinge, bodies that glow, eyes that stretch to absurd proportions. Survival in darkness requires invention, and evolution has provided endlessly. The transition from twilight to midnight is gradual for the observer, but absolute in its effect. Once the last photon vanishes, the rules change. It is not only our senses that must adjust, but our imagination. We picture life in terms of what we see, yet down here, vision is unreliable and sometimes irrelevant. Smell, vibration, electrical fields, and pressure all become ways of navigating. To think of light as memory is to acknowledge that we have moved past it, into a domain where memory itself may not matter. For the creatures here, the sun is not forgotten because it was never known. Consider for a moment how different human life would be without light. Our cultures, our technologies, our very biology are tied to cycles of brightness. Sleep and waking, work and rest, all defined by the rising and setting of the sun. Down here those cycles vanish. Life has written new rhythms, new methods of marking existence. Perhaps that is why this place feels so otherworldly. It is not just the darkness, it is the absence of everything we rely on to define time and space. The fading of light marks not the end of a journey, but the beginning of another. From this point onward, everything that exists has been shaped by darkness, pressure, and scarcity. The memory of sunlight becomes irrelevant. What matters is how to glow when needed, how to hide when threatened, how to endure when food may not arrive for weeks. Life here is not less than life above. It is simply different, tuned to an environment we can barely imagine. The ocean does not mourn the absence of light. It accepts it, and in that acceptance it fosters extraordinary diversity. For us, the fading of light is an end. For the midnight zone, it is the foundation of existence. And as we continue to sink, leaving daylight fully behind, we begin to see that the ocean's greatest stories are told not in brightness, but in shadow. Once the last traces of sunlight have disappeared and the sea holds only darkness, it may seem like we have entered an empty world. Yet it does not take long to realise that the blackness is not truly empty at all. Out of the dark come faint glimmers, tiny sparks that appear and vanish as quickly as they arrive. They look almost like stars scattered across an unseen sky, but these are not distant suns. They are living things, producing their own light in a place where the sun never shines. The first sparks of life in the midnight zone come from bioluminescence, a process so common here that it is more the rule than the exception. More than 3/4 of the animals known to live at these depths are capable of producing light. They do it not with electricity or fire, but with chemistry. Inside their bodies are compounds that react together, releasing energy in the form of light. Sometimes the light is blue, the colour that travels farthest in water. Sometimes it is green. In rare cases it can be red, which is almost invisible in the deep and used like a secret signal. For us, these flashes feel like signals from another world. For the animals that create them, they are tools for survival. Light here is currency. It is bait, communication, camouflage, and even defence. A fish drifting silently in the black may dangle a glowing lure in front of its mouth, waiting for another creature to mistake it for food. A squid startled by a predator may release a cloud of glowing fluid, a sudden explosion of brightness that confuses its attacker and gives it time to slip away. Small crustaceans flash rhythmically, perhaps to warn others of their kind, perhaps to attract attention from mates. Every light has a purpose. The first sparks of life also remind us that in darkness, visibility is both a gift and a risk. To shine is to be seen, and to be seen is to be vulnerable. The animals here have mastered the balance between revealing themselves and remaining hidden. Some glow faintly, matching the dim light above them, so that predators looking upwards see only darkness. Others can turn their lights on and off at will, using them only in brief bursts. Some create patterns across their bodies, like constellations written on living skin. Among the first glowing creatures we encounter are lanternfish. They are small, usually only a few inches long, but their numbers are staggering. It is believed that lanternfish may be the most abundant vertebrates on Earth, outnumbering even humans by unimaginable scales. They live here in the darkness, their sides lined with tiny glowing organs called photophores. Each species has a unique pattern of these lights, almost like fingerprints. Some researchers suspect the patterns are used to identify each other, like secret codes flashing in the dark. For predators below, the lights also serve as camouflage, erasing the fish's silhouette against the faint glow of water above. Without them, the lanternfish would appear as a shadow. With them, it disappears into the black. Another spark comes from the hatchetfish. With bodies shaped thin and flat, they gleam with reflective silver scales. But reflection is not their only trick. Their undersides glow just enough to cancel out their shadows. A predator looking up from below sees nothing but an empty column of water. The hatchetfish has erased itself from view by using light as armour. Anglerfish are perhaps the most famous residents of these depths, and for good reason. Their appearance is so alien that they hardly seem real. A fleshy stalk juts from their heads, tipped with a glowing bulb that pulses in the darkness. They remain still, motionless hunters, waiting for smaller fish to be drawn toward the light. When the prey comes close, the anglerfish's enormous mouth snaps shut, its needle-like teeth ensuring that nothing escapes. The lure is not just a tool, it is part of the fish's body, evolved from its dorsal spine. In some species, the lure is home to symbiotic bacteria that produce the glow, a partnership that benefits both. Drifting nearby might be a comb jelly, its delicate body almost invisible except for the shimmering lines of light that run along it. Unlike the chemical bioluminescence of fish and squid, comb jellies produce a rainbow of colours as light refracts through the rows of cilia that propel them through the water. They appear as drifting jewels, fragile yet persistent, drifting in currents with a beauty that feels out of place in such darkness. But beauty is not their purpose. Their glowing patterns may confuse predators, disorienting them long enough for escape. The sparks are not limited to individuals. Sometimes entire groups create light together. Siphonophores, long chains of tiny organisms that act as one, can glow along their entire length, stretching tens of meters through the water like living strands of stars. To see one illuminated in the black is to watch a constellation drift by. Each small member of the chain has a role, some specialized for feeding, some for movement, others for reproduction, but together they function as one animal. Their light is not random, it is coordinated, a living structure designed to thrive in the dark. As these sparks flicker around us, it is tempting to think of them as decoration, like fireflies on a summer night. But in the midnight zone, nothing is wasted. Every glow costs energy. Every glow carries risk. These animals use light because they must. Without it, they cannot feed, cannot mate, cannot survive. The first sparks of life are not for our wonder. They are strategies perfected by evolution, honed by millions of years of existence in darkness. The way animals use bioluminescence tells us much about how life adapts when light itself becomes rare. On land, eyes and colours are essential. Birds use bright feathers to attract mates. Flowers bloom in vivid shades to draw pollinators. Predators use camouflage to sneak through grass and trees. In the deep sea, the same principles apply, but light itself becomes the medium. Attraction, disguise, warning, all achieved by making light, not reflecting it. It is a reminder that survival often comes down to communication, even in the darkest corners of the planet. The first sparks of life also highlight the scale of the ecosystem here. We tend to imagine the deep sea as a barren desert, but these flashes reveal abundance. Where one light glows, another soon follows. A predator chasing prey may set off a chain reaction, each fleeing animal triggering its own defense, until the darkness blazes briefly with dozens of lights before fading again. Scientists who send cameras into these depths often record bursts of brightness that seem almost choreographed, though they are simply the product of many lives colliding in a small space. There is something humbling in realizing that these sparks are happening all the time, whether we are there to see them or not. The ocean does not perform for us. Its creatures glow for their own purposes, and their light is older than our species, older than our cities, older than the lamps and screens we take for granted. They have carried fire in the dark for millions of years, while our ancestors were still learning to kindle flames on land. The first sparks also change how we imagine exploration. When humans first sent submarines and cameras into these depths, the glowing creatures astonished them. Accounts from early expeditions describe scientists staring at the small screens in disbelief as bursts of light danced across the black. Even now, each new dive often reveals species never before documented. Sometimes the cameras record flashes that cannot be explained, lights in patterns too complex to be random, suggesting that entire forms of life remain undiscovered. As we watch these sparks, we see not only survival, but possibility. If life can thrive here, in endless night, perhaps it can thrive elsewhere. Planets and moons with oceans beneath ice, with no sunlight, may still host glowing creatures, sustained by chemistry rather than sun. The first sparks of life in Earth's midnight zone are not just reminders of our own ocean's mysteries. They are clues to what may exist far beyond. Drifting here among the lights, it becomes clear that darkness does not mean lifelessness. It simply means that life has found a different way. The first sparks are not faint reminders of the sun. They are declarations that life endures, adapts, and even flourishes when light fades away. And as we move deeper into this realm, more of these glows will appear, guiding us further into the unknown, each spark a sign that the darkness is alive. The deeper we drift, the more the ocean reminds us of its sheer weight. Above, the surface gives the illusion of openness, of freedom, of space. But once you move down into the body of the sea, you begin to feel that water is not simply empty space filled with liquid. It is matter, it is mass, it is tons upon tons pressing in from every side. The further you sink, the greater that pressure becomes, relentless and absolute. At the surface, the pressure of air pressing on us is what we call one atmosphere. It's something we don't think about because our bodies are built for it. But the ocean adds more weight quickly. Every 10 meters down is another atmosphere layered on top. By the time you reach 100 meters, you're feeling the weight of 10 atmospheres. At 1,000 meters, the weight has grown to 100. At 4,000 meters, where much of the midnight zone sprawls, the pressure is so extreme that it would crush a human body instantly as though you were made of paper. The numbers are almost meaningless to the imagination, but they point toward one truth. The deep ocean is a place built for resilience, and the creatures that live here are moulded by pressure into forms we could not survive. The weight of the deep does not announce itself in sudden cracks or crushing noises. It is silent, steady, unavoidable. For the animals here, it is simply the background of existence. They don't think of it as extreme. Their bodies are soft, lacking fragile cavities of air. They are built without bones that would snap or lungs that would implode. Their tissues are dense, flexible, adapted to resist collapse. When you look at a jelly drifting in the black, you are looking at an answer to pressure. When you see a squid with fluid-filled eyes the size of dinner plates, you're seeing another solution. For them, pressure is not an enemy. It is the environment itself. Humans, by contrast, fight against pressure whenever we try to descend. Our machines must be built to withstand crushing forces, their walls thick, their windows small, their designs tested again and again. Submersibles that venture into the midnight zone are shaped like spheres, because a sphere is the strongest form against external pressure. Even so, the walls may be made of steel several inches thick, or titanium forged to resist collapse. A single flaw, a single crack, and the weight of the water would destroy the vessel instantly. Exploration here is a reminder that we are visitors, fragile in a place that does not tolerate mistakes. But the creatures of the midnight zone are not fragile. They have found ways to exist that make them seem almost alien to us. Consider the blobfish, often misrepresented in distorted photographs taken at the surface. In its true form, deep in the water where it belongs, it is not the strange caricature we usually see. Down there, its body is in perfect balance with the surrounding pressure. It has no swim bladder, no air sacs, nothing that could rupture. Its gelatinous flesh keeps it buoyant without wasting energy. Only when it is pulled to the surface does it deform, because it is no longer in the world it was made for. The blobfish is not ugly. It is simply shaped for the weight of the deep. Other fish rely on high concentrations of certain compounds in their cells, chemicals that help stabilize proteins against pressure. Without them, the proteins that allow muscles to contract and enzymes to function would collapse, losing their shape. It is as if evolution has written pressure into the very chemistry of their bodies, rewriting the molecular scripts that make life possible. The weight of the deep also changes how animals behave. With so much pressure, movement becomes costly. Energy cannot be wasted on constant swimming or chasing. Many creatures are ambush predators, lying still in the dark, waiting for food to come near. Others drift slowly, conserving every calorie. Some have jaws that can open wider than their bodies, stomachs that stretch to many times their normal size. These adaptations mean that when food appears, perhaps once in days or weeks, it can be swallowed whole, no matter how large, and digested slowly while the animal waits for the next opportunity. Pressure shapes not only bodies but lifestyles. Even sound bends to the will of pressure. In the midnight zone, the water is dense enough to carry sound in unusual ways. There is a point called the so far channel, a layer where sound travels farther than anywhere else in the ocean, sometimes across entire basins. Many deep-sea animals seem to take advantage of this, their clicks and pulses designed to carry in ways our ears cannot fully detect. Whales diving to these depths use the channel to send songs that can travel for hundreds of kilometres. For smaller creatures, vibrations in this dense medium are like whispers through walls, letting them sense movements far away. The pressure itself is part of the soundscape. For humans, one of the strangest aspects of pressure is how it bends our own expectations of what life can endure. We often think of the deep as a hostile desert, but down here the rules are simply different. There are shrimp with bodies transparent enough to vanish against the dark, yet their shells are strong enough to hold under tons of force. There are worms living near vents that withstand not only pressure, but boiling water infused with chemicals that would kill us instantly. There are amphipods that thrive at depths of 10 kilometres, in trenches where the weight is more than 1,000 times greater than the air at sea level. Each one proves that pressure is not a barrier, it is simply another condition to be met. What fascinates researchers is how pressure and adaptation interact at the cellular level. At extreme depths, membranes that hold cells together would normally become rigid, unable to function. But deep-sea creatures have altered the structure of their membranes to remain flexible. They have proteins stabilized by special molecules, enzymes tuned to work at high pressures. In some ways, they are living laboratories, showing us how life might survive not only here but in other extreme environments beyond Earth. When explorers bring animals from the midnight zone to the surface, the story of pressure becomes painfully clear. Many cannot survive the transition. Their bodies rupture, their organs collapse, their forms distort. What looks grotesque to us is not their true form, but a body undone by the sudden release of weight. It reminds us that the deep is not just a place, it is a state of being. To exist there is to be defined by pressure in every moment, in every structure of the body. The weight of the deep also influences reproduction. Some animals here have strategies that minimize the need for constant searching in an environment where meeting another of your kind may be rare. Anglerfish are famous for this. In many species, males are tiny compared to females. When a male encounters a female, he bites into her and fuses with her body, eventually sharing her blood supply and becoming little more than a permanent attachment. To us it seems bizarre, almost grotesque. But in a place where finding a mate may be a once-in-a-lifetime event, it is effective. Pressure is not only physical, but ecological, shaping even the most intimate parts of life. For all its intensity, the weight of the deep is not something creatures here struggle against. It is not an obstacle to overcome. It is simply the condition of their world, as ordinary to them as the pull of gravity is to us. We cannot imagine living under such force because our bodies are tuned to a narrow range. Yet for the animals of the Midnight Zone, this is the only world they know. As we continue downward, it is impossible to forget the scale of it. Above us is kilometres of water, pressing from every side, unbroken, unrelenting. Around us are creatures that embody resilience, not by resisting pressure, but by existing within it completely. The weight of the deep is both a barrier and a cradle, defining the lives of everything here. And as we sink deeper still, the darkness grows thicker, the silence more profound, the pressure greater with every metre, carrying us into realms where survival seems improbable and yet flourishes all the same. In the blackness of the deep sea, light is no longer a gift from the sun. It is something life itself has learned to create, wield, and shape. The Midnight Zone belongs to the masters of glow, creatures that bend chemistry into brilliance, turning darkness into their stage. Here, where sunlight is only a distant memory, glowing bodies fill the void with sparks of colour, brief pulses, and steady glimmers that mean survival. Bioluminescence is one of the most extraordinary adaptations on Earth. At its heart, it is chemistry at work, a reaction between molecules called luciferin and enzymes called luciferase. When combined in the presence of oxygen, they release energy as light. The glow is usually blue or green because those colours travel farthest through seawater, but some species push the limits and glow in red or even violet. To us, these are flashes of wonder, but for the animals themselves, they are tools sharpened by millions of years of evolution. Some of the most abundant masters of glow are lanternfish. Though each one is small, together they dominate the twilight and midnight zones, numbering in the billions. Their bodies are lined with photophores, glowing organs that can be arranged in unique species-specific patterns. These patterns may act like signatures, helping lanternfish recognize their own kind. More importantly, they use their light for counter-illumination. By glowing on their bellies, they match the faint glimmer from above, erasing their silhouettes. A predator looking upward sees nothing but empty water. What seems like a small adaptation has become one of the most widespread survival strategies in the ocean. The anglerfish takes light in another direction. Its body is strange enough without the glow, large mouth, teeth curved inward, and a form built for ambush rather than pursuit. But what makes it famous is the fleshy stalk that extends from its head, tipped with a glowing bulb. This lure, called an esker, pulses in the dark like a worm or small fish. Unsuspecting prey drawn to the glow drifts too close. In an instant, the anglerfish's mouth opens wide, and the victim is swallowed whole. The light is not decoration, it is bait, deadly and efficient. Some anglerfish species even wiggle the lure like a fishing rod, giving it motion that adds to the deception. The glow comes from symbiotic bacteria that live inside the bulb, feeding on nutrients provided by the fish. In return, they provide the light, a partnership that has turned the anglerfish into one of the ocean's most iconic hunters. Squid are also among the masters of glow. Some species carry glowing organs near their eyes, along their arms, or on their mantles. certain deep-sea squid have bioluminescent ink. When threatened, instead of a dark cloud, they release a glowing one. The sudden burst of light confuses predators, distracting them long enough for escape. Others flash in rhythmic pulses, patterns that may serve as communication in the blackness. Scientists still debate whether these light shows are messages, mating signals, or warnings, but whatever their meaning, they demonstrate how versatile glow can be. Not all light is used for attack or defense. Some is meant to draw partners together in a world where finding another of your species may be rare. Tiny crustaceans called ostracods release glowing trails in the water, bright streaks that drift for several seconds. In some species, males create elaborate light displays, glowing in sequences that act almost like a courtship song. Females, recognizing the patterns, respond. These displays are not unlike fireflies flashing on warm nights, except here they happen in absolute darkness, under crushing pressure, hidden from any eyes but those that belong to potential mates. Then there are creatures that use glow to mislead. Dragonfish are long, slender hunters with fangs like needles. They possess photophores along their bodies, but what makes them remarkable is their ability to produce red light. Almost all bioluminescence in the ocean is blue or green, because those wavelengths travel farthest, but dragonfish are among the few that can glow in red. Why is this unusual? Because most deep-sea animals cannot see red light at all. To them, it is invisible, but dragonfish can. They use their red headlights like secret spotlights, illuminating prey that cannot even sense they're being watched. To human eyes, it would be like shining an invisible torch in the dark, revealing everything while remaining unseen. Another master of glow is the hatchetfish. Its thin, blade-shaped body gleams with silver, but its glow is more subtle. Photophores line its underside, carefully controlled to match the faint light from above. By adjusting brightness, the fish blends perfectly into its background. Without the glow, its silhouette would give it away. With it, the fish is nearly impossible to detect. In a realm where survival often depends on not being noticed, this kind of precise camouflage is essential. Siphonophores turn glow into spectacle. These colonies, made of hundreds or thousands of small organisms working together, can stretch longer than whales. Some produce light along their entire length, creating shimmering chains that drift through the black. To watch one pulse in the dark is to see a living constellation, a galaxy made of tiny sparks moving together. Each individual has a role, some feed, some reproduce, some move, and together they function as a single animal. Their light is not just beautiful. It can lure prey into their stinging tentacles or frighten predators with sudden brightness. Jellies, too, play their part. Many deep-sea jellyfish glow in soft pulses, their bells illuminating like lanterns in the dark. Some species, when disturbed, release glowing particles breaking into sparks that drift away. Others display glowing rings that travel up and down their bodies, hypnotic patterns that may startle attackers. The deep is filled with their fragile bodies, each one a reminder that even the softest forms can wield light as defense. Some of the strangest glows come from animals we rarely imagine as luminous. Certain shrimp shoot jets of glowing fluid at predators, creating bursts of light that linger in the water like floating mines. Others glow faintly all over, using their entire bodies as signals. Even worms drifting in the current sometimes emit light when disturbed, glowing threads unravelling behind them. Humans have tried to study this glow for centuries, collecting creatures and observing their flashes. Early sailors described the sea lighting up around their ships, the water glowing as if filled with stars. Much of this came from plankton, tiny organisms capable of glowing when disturbed. Even today, beaches in some parts of the world light up with bioluminescence when waves crash, or when feet stir the water. What seems magical at the shore is routine in the midnight zone. The masters of glow have perfected their art not for our wonder, but for their own needs. Light is scarce here, and producing it costs energy. No animal can afford to waste it. Every spark has a reason: to hide, to hunt, to confuse, to attract. To us it may look like a random fireworks display scattered through the black. To them, it is as structured and deliberate as language. The study of these glows has even inspired human technology. Scientists analyse the chemistry of luciferin and luciferase, hoping to apply it in medicine, imaging and biotechnology. The way animals control their light, switching it on and off instantly, adjusting brightness, shaping patterns, offers lessons in efficiency. The deep is not only a place of mystery, but also a laboratory of ideas, waiting to be understood. The diversity of glow in the midnight zone also reminds us how much we still don't know. Submersibles often capture footage of creatures flashing in patterns no one can explain. Some display synchronized waves of light across their bodies, others emit glows that last far longer than usual. Each dive reveals new mysteries, suggesting that the language of light here is more complex than we realize. We have only begun to decipher it. When you imagine this world, it's worth thinking of the ocean not as empty black but as filled with sparks, each one a living being using light to survive. To hover here is to be surrounded by blinking signals, sudden bursts, drifting trails. Some lights are constant, others fleeting. Some are meant to attract, others to repel. Together they create a shifting landscape, a map written not in shapes or colours, but in flashes across the dark. The masters of glow show us that life does not accept limits. Even in a place without sunlight, where pressure is immense and food is scarce, evolution has found ways to paint the darkness. These animals have taken the absence of light and turned it into opportunity. The midnight zone could have been a place of shadow alone, but instead it is a place where light is alive, carried in bodies, shared between creatures, woven into the struggle to endure. And as we continue through it, every flash becomes a reminder that darkness is never absolute, not even here. In the deep sea, where darkness is constant and food is scarce, survival often belongs to those who can hunt with patience and precision. The black water is not silent emptiness. It is a hunting ground, one defined not by speed or strength alone, but by cunning, deception, and endurance. Every predator here is shaped by the challenges of this environment, where meals may come rarely, and failure to catch one may mean weeks of hunger. The most iconic hunter of the midnight zone is the anglerfish. It does not pursue its prey with bursts of speed or tireless chases. Instead it waits, conserving energy and stillness. Its body is small compared to the size of its head and jaws, which are lined with long, curved teeth that prevent anything from escaping once caught. But the true weapon of the anglerfish is the lure. Extending from its forehead is a rod-like stalk tipped with a glowing bulb. In the absolute black, this small pointer light looks like a drifting worm or shrimp. Smaller fish, drawn by the glow, approach out of curiosity or hunger. The moment they come close enough, the anglerfish strikes, swallowing them whole. The prey never realizes the light was a trap until it is too late. Not all hunters use such direct tricks. The gulper eel is another predator of these depths. With a mouth so enormous it can swallow prey almost as large as itself. Its lower jaw stretches wide like a net, hinged to open far beyond the proportions of most fish. The gulper eel does not rely on speed. Instead, it drifts with its mouth open, ready to engulf anything that wanders into range. Its stomach can expand dramatically, storing large meals that may sustain it for long periods. In an environment where hunting opportunities are unpredictable, the gulper eel is designed to take advantage of whatever comes its way, no matter the size. Then there are dragonfish, long and slender, with needle-like teeth and bioluminescent organs. These predators are among the few capable of producing red light, invisible to most creatures of the deep. They use this light like a private spotlight, illuminating prey without being seen themselves. Their enormous eyes are adapted to pick up the faint glow, giving them an advantage that turns the darkness into a one-sided battlefield. With their fangs and stealth, dragonfish are hunters built for ambush, combining invisibility with vision no other species can match. Some hunters rely less on trickery and more on endurance. Deep-sea eels with long, muscular bodies patrol the black with slow, deliberate movements. They conserve energy, striking only when they are sure of success. Their jaws are often equipped with hinge structures, allowing them to extend outward, snapping onto prey with precision. These eels are opportunists, taking advantage of anything edible that comes within reach. In the deep, specialization can be dangerous. Flexibility often ensures survival. Squid also play the role of hunters here. While many shallow water squids rely on speed and coordinated hunting, some deep-sea species adapt differently. They use long tentacles tipped with hooks or sticky pads to capture prey that drifts too close. Certain squids carry glowing organs, which may help lure prey or confuse predators. Others patrol the black with eyes that can detect faint glimmers, striking with accuracy when opportunity arises. Their bodies are built for sudden bursts of movement, conserving energy until the moment of attack. The hunters of the midnight zone are not limited to fish and squid. Crustaceans too play their part. Some deep-sea shrimp use snapping claws that create shock waves strong enough to stun prey. Others simply rely on patience, hiding in the darkness until smaller animals come near. Even small predators can thrive here, provided they are efficient. In this world, size is not always the deciding factor. Strategy matters more. What unites all these hunters is the same truth. Food is scarce, and every opportunity must count. Unlike the surface, where predators may chase herds or schools daily, in the deep, meals can be rare. Many hunters have jaws that can open wider than their heads, allowing them to swallow prey much larger than themselves. Their stomachs stretch to hold enormous meals, digesting them slowly over days or weeks. This way, a single successful catch may sustain them until the next chance arises. Some hunters use deception not only to lure prey but also to hide from larger predators. Many fish carry photophores arranged in specific patterns that help them blend in with the faint glow above. To the eye of a predator looking up, they vanish, silhouettes erased by carefully tuned light. Others rely on transparency, their bodies nearly invisible, organs faint outlines drifting in the water. Even hunters must avoid becoming prey, and in the midnight zone no creature is ever completely safe. The methods of hunting here may seem alien, but they reflect universal principles. Where food is scarce, efficiency becomes everything. Where light is absent, vision must adapt or be replaced. Where pressure is immense, bodies must bend rather than break. Predators here are not monstrous by accident. They are the distilled result of millions of years of necessity, each adaptation sharpened by hunger and survival. Humans often imagine predators as creatures of strength, lions chasing antelope, wolves running down deer. In the deep sea, power looks different. It is patience, deception, and the ability to take advantage of rare moments. An anglerfish that waits motionless for hours is no less a predator than a shark slicing through shallows. Its strategy is simply suited to a world where energy cannot be wasted. For scientists exploring these depths, encounters with hunters often come as surprises. Submersibles record sudden flashes of light, followed by the quick snap of jaws. Cameras reveal strange shapes with teeth too large for their mouths, eyes glowing in the dark, bodies stretched into improbable forms. Each encounter adds to the picture of an ecosystem built on scarcity, where predation is not constant but opportunistic, sudden and absolute. What makes these hunters even more remarkable is that they are part of a food web sustained by the thinnest trickle of energy. Unlike the surface, where sunlight drives photosynthesis, the midnight zone depends on what drifts down from above. Marine snow, carcasses, and the occasional fall of a large animal provide the foundation. Hunters here are not chasing endless prey. They're taking part in a delicate chain, where every meal may have travelled from thousands of meters above. The energy they capture is ancient sunlight, filtered through layers of life before finally reaching the black depths. The hunters of the deep are also reminders of how much remains unknown. Many species have been seen only once, recorded briefly by cameras and never encountered again. Their teeth, their jaws, their glowing organs suggest hunting strategies, but their full lives remain hidden. The midnight zone is vast and our glimpses are limited. For every anglerfish or gulper eel we know, there are countless predators yet to be discovered, each with its own method of surviving in the dark. To hover here in imagination is to feel the tension of the hunt. The black is not silent. It holds sudden movements, brief chases, flashes of light followed by stillness. Every predator is both hunter and hunted. Every meal both victory and risk. This is not a place where life thrives easily. It is a place where life fights for every scrap, where hunger shapes bodies into strange forms and patience becomes the greatest weapon of all. In the darkness of the midnight zone, visibility itself becomes both a weapon and a weakness. Light's precious here, every spark calculated, every flicker carrying risk. For some creatures, glowing is a way to lure prey or signal mates. For others, the safest path is to vanish altogether. To survive unseen in this vast blackness is an art, and many deep-sea animals have become invisible beings, evolving bodies so delicate and transparent that they melt into the water around them. The idea of invisibility in the ocean is not science fiction. It is a matter of physics and biology. Water bends and scatters light differently than air. Any body in the sea that bends light the same way as the surrounding water becomes difficult to detect. That is why so many creatures here are translucent or nearly invisible. Their tissues allow light to pass through, leaving little for predators to notice. In a place where being seen often means being eaten, invisibility is as valuable as armour or teeth. One of the most remarkable examples is the glass squid. Its body is nearly see-through, with organs suspended like faint shadows inside. Only its eyes remain visible, dark spheres that betray its presence. To counter this, some glass squid have evolved photophores beneath their eyes, glowing faintly to mask the outline. When they drift in the water column, they are nearly impossible to spot. For a predator searching upward, the glass squid is more shadow than substance, blending so perfectly into its surroundings that it may as well not exist at all. Jellyfish and comb jellies also embody invisibility. Their gelatinous bodies are more than 90% water, delicate structures that refract light in ways that make them vanish into the black. A predator searching in the dark may pass within centimetres and never notice. Some jellies take this further, becoming not only transparent but also nearly colourless, their bells and tentacles invisible against the faintest background light. Only when disturbed do they sometimes betray themselves, glowing briefly before fading again. Shrimp, too, have found ways to disappear. Many deep-sea species have shells so clear that their internal organs are the only things that can be seen. Even these are minimised or arranged to reduce their visibility. Some carry reflective plates that mirror the faint glow from above, turning them into flickers of nothingness. Others shift their position constantly, tilting their bodies so that their outlines are erased. To look at them in their world is to see almost nothing at all, a ghost moving through the water. The hatchetfish is not fully invisible, but it demonstrates another strategy. Its reflective scales act like mirrors, bouncing back any light that strikes them. In shallow water, reflection might stand out, but here, where light is scarce and comes mostly from above, the hatchetfish vanishes into its surroundings. Its glowing underside erases shadows, while its sides mirror the faintest traces of brightness. To a predator, the fish seems to dissolve into the background. Siphonophores, long chains of tiny organisms, also employ invisibility. Each small member is nearly transparent, strung together like beads of glass. Only when they produce light do they become noticeable, but even then their glow may serve more as a distraction than a revelation. A predator might chase the flash and miss the rest of the colony, leaving it intact to drift through the black. The invisibility of these beings is not perfect, of course. Large eyes evolved in many predators attuned to catch the faintest contrast, the slightest shimmer of transparency against darkness. Yet the advantage of being nearly unseen cannot be overstated. In a realm where speed and agility are limited by pressure and scarcity of energy, the best defence is often not to be noticed at all. Transparency costs little compared to growing armour or spines. It is a quiet adaptation, subtle yet widespread. Humans trying to study these invisible beings often struggle. Nets brought up from the depths may return empty, not because nothing was there, but because delicate transparent bodies collapsed under pressure or dissolved on the way up. Cameras reveal ghostly shapes drifting past, sometimes so faint they can be mistaken for shadows or tricks of light. The ocean holds countless species we barely recognise, simply because they are designed to remain unseen. The strategy of invisibility also extends to camouflage beyond transparency. Some creatures scatter pigments in their skin to break up outlines, creating patterns that mimic drifting particles of marine snow. Others use reflective tissues to shine like faint glimmers, blending into the background glow of the water column. Invisibility is not one technique, but many, layered together to create bodies that are always on the edge of perception. What makes invisibility so effective in the midnight zone is the absence of constant light. In shallower waters, transparency would not be enough. Shadows cast by the sun would betray outlines. But here, where illumination is rare, invisibility does not need to be perfect. It needs only to reduce contrast enough to avoid detection by the sensitive eyes of predators. Even partial invisibility can mean the difference between life and death. There is also an elegance in how invisibility reshapes the way these animals exist. Without heavy bones, without bright colours, without bulky structures, many of them are fragile to our eyes. Yet their fragility is their strength. They move with currents, expending little energy, feeding on particles too small for others to bother with. Their invisibility allows them to exist in the open, drifting where predators lurk, confident that most will never notice them. Some scientists suggest that invisibility in the deep may represent one of the most common strategies of life in the ocean. The majority of biomass here may be made up of transparent creatures, from tiny plankton to large jellies. If true, it means that the world's largest habitat is dominated not by monsters of teeth and jaws, but by beings that have almost no form at all, ghost-like presences that live unseen. For humans, invisibility is often imagined as power, as something extraordinary. In the ocean, it is simply another adaptation, one as natural as fins or gills. The invisible beings of the Midnight Zone remind us that survival is not always about strength or ferocity. Sometimes it is about not being noticed, about moving quietly, about blending so completely into the environment that you become part of it. To hover here and picture them is to realise that the deep sea is not empty. It only seems so because the creatures have mastered concealment. Every square metre of water may hold life, yet we cannot see it because it has chosen not to be seen. Invisible beings surround us, drifting silently, glowing faintly only when necessary, vanishing again as soon as danger passes. As the journey continues, their presence lingers as a reminder. Darkness does not only belong to the hunters or the glowing predators, it also belongs to those who vanish into it, those who live by absence, those who survive by never drawing a gaze. The Midnight Zone is not only a theatre of light, but also of invisibility, where existence itself is often hidden from sight. In the stillness of the Midnight Zone, not every creature hides in transparency or flickers with faint light. Some take the opposite path, growing to sizes so immense they defy expectations of what life can become in such a harsh and resource-limited place. Giants drift and hunt here, their bodies shaped by pressure, scarcity, and endless darkness. They are reminders that in the deep ocean, scale is not limited by sunlight. It is rewritten by other forces entirely. The colossal squid is one of the most legendary of these beings. Unlike the smaller squids near the surface, It grows to lengths that may exceed 12 or even 14 metres, with eyes the size of dinner plates, possibly the largest in the animal kingdom. These enormous eyes are not just curiosities, they are tools built for darkness, capable of detecting the faintest glimmers of bioluminescence, the distant flashes of prey or predators far across the black water. In a world where sight is nearly useless, the colossal squid has developed vision on a scale unmatched anywhere else. Its tentacles are armed with hooks instead of simple suckers, some swivelling, some sharp, designed to latch onto prey in ways that leave little chance of escape. For years, the colossal squid was known only from dead specimens brought up by fishing nets, or from scars found on the bodies of sperm whales, their natural predators. Only recently have living ones been glimpsed, silent giants drifting through the depths with a grace that belies their monstrous reputation. Not far behind in mystery is the giant squid, a cousin equally enormous, reaching lengths of more than 10 metres. Unlike the colossal squid, which seems more heavily built, the giant squid is sleeker, with long, sinuous tentacles that can extend like ropes into the black. Stories of giant squid have fueled legends for centuries, inspiring tales of sea monsters that dragged sailors to their doom. For a long time, they remained myths, but the scars on whales told a truer story. Sperm whales dive deep into the midnight zone to feed on these giants, and the battles leave white marks across their skin, circles where suction cups once latched. To imagine such encounters is to imagine one titan facing another, a duel in silence, hidden from human eyes for most of history. But the giants of the deep are not limited to squid. Some fish grow to proportions far larger than their shallow water relatives. The oarfish, sometimes called the ribbon fish, is one of the longest bony fish known, reaching lengths of more than 10 metres. Its body is thin and undulating like a silver banner drifting in the water. Rarely seen alive, it occasionally washes ashore after storms, its size fueling rumours of sea serpents. In reality, the oarfish spends its life in the twilight and midnight zones, rising only rarely, its great length perhaps an adaptation for stability in the endless currents of the deep. Siphonophores are another kind of giant, though they look nothing like a single animal. Instead, they are colonies of countless smaller individuals, each specialised for a role, some to swim, some to feed, some to reproduce. Strung together, they can stretch for more than 30 or 40 metres, longer than blue whales. Their bodies are so delicate they rarely survive capture, which is why much of what we know comes from fleeting glimpses in submersible lights. To see one alive is to see a living chain of stars glowing in coordinated pulses, drifting endlessly through the dark. Even jellies have their giants. The lion's mane jellyfish, though not confined to the midnight zone, sometimes reaches depths here, its tentacles stretching more than 30 metres, trailing behind it like a living curtain. These tentacles carry stinging cells powerful enough to paralyse smaller prey, sweeping anything unfortunate enough to drift too close into the jelly's bell. In the stillness of the deep, such immense forms are not rare. They simply take on shapes adapted to drifting, conserving energy, while extending reach across vast spaces. Why giants thrive in the midnight zone is still debated. Some scientists suggest that gigantism is a response to scarcity. Larger bodies may allow more efficient movement, storing energy to survive long stretches without food. Others argue that size provides defence, deterring smaller predators and making it easier to withstand the crushing pressure. In cold, dense water, metabolism slows, allowing animals to grow over longer lifespans than those in warmer, shallower seas. Whatever the reason, the result is a world where the unimaginable becomes real. Even amphipods, small crustaceans usually only a few millimetres long near the surface, grow to sizes of several centimetres in the deep, some reaching lengths of over 10 centimetres. It may not sound large, but in proportion it is colossal. The same applies to isopods, close relatives of woodlice, which in the deep can grow to nearly half a metre in length. These oversized scavengers crawl across the sea floor, their armoured bodies built to withstand pressure, their size a reflection of an environment that encourages extremes. Encounters with giants often come suddenly. A submersible's lights will sweep across what seems like empty water, and then a shape will emerge, larger than the vehicle itself, silent and slow. Cameras capture brief glimpses before the creature vanishes back into darkness. Much of what we know comes not from observation, but from remains that drift upward. Squid tentacles found floating at the surface, or the bodies of oarfish washed onto beaches. These fragments remind us that the largest creatures of the Midnight Zone live beyond our reach, appearing only when chance allows. The giants also play critical roles in the ecosystem. Carcasses of whales, for instance, become oases on the seafloor, feeding entire communities for decades. In turn, whales themselves feed on squid giants, driving energy between the surface and the depths. The Midnight Zone is not isolated. It connects to the rest of the ocean through these great beings, carriers of energy across worlds. What fascinates about the giants is not only their size, but their elusiveness. Despite centuries of exploration, we still lack basic details about their lives. How often do giant squid reproduce? How far do oarfish migrate? How long do siphonophores survive? Each question remains unanswered, reminders that these enormous animals remain among the least understood on the planet. The vastness of the deep protects them, keeping their secrets safe. To drift among them, even in thought, is to feel scale differently. The surface world has its whales and elephants, but here, in the dark, giants appear in forms soft, sinuous, or fragile. Some are predators, armed with hooks and jaws. Others are drifters, bodies so delicate they could collapse at a touch. All are adapted to this space, their enormity not an accident but a natural response to the conditions around them. The giants below are proof that the Midnight Zone is not only a realm of the tiny or the invisible, it is also a place where life pushes boundaries, stretching bodies into extremes, filling the black with forms so large they seem unreal. They remind us that the ocean is not a place of limits, but of possibilities, where pressure and darkness do not prevent life from growing immense, but instead shape it into something beyond our expectation. And as the journey continues, these silent giants linger in imagination, drifting somewhere unseen in the endless dark. In the deep sea, not all life is built for the chase, and not all survival is defined by teeth or lures. Many of the creatures here have taken a different path, one that seems almost passive compared to the hunters of the black or the giants that dominate certain stretches of the Midnight Zone. These are the drifters and wanderers, beings that allow the currents to carry them, that live not through aggression but through endurance, that survive in the quiet acceptance of the ocean's vast movement. To call them drifters is not to suggest weakness. On the contrary, their strategy is among the most successful in the ocean. By letting go of control and moving with the water, they conserve precious energy, an advantage in a place where every calorie counts. Their bodies are often fragile, gelatinous, or transparent, shapes that do not fight the weight of the sea but flow with it. They may seem insubstantial to us, yet they make up a large part of the biomass of the deep. Jellyfish are among the most iconic of these wanderers. Their bells pulse slowly, contracting just enough to keep them from sinking, but most of their travel comes from currents they cannot control. To us they may appear vulnerable, drifting aimlessly, but they are anything but defenceless. Their tentacles trail behind them, armed with stinging cells that paralyze small prey. In the Midnight Zone, some species grow to enormous sizes, their delicate structures stretched across vast distances, catching whatever the currents deliver. Others remain small, barely larger than a fingertip, glowing softly as they drift. Their fragility hides their resilience. Jellyfish have existed for hundreds of millions of years, surviving mass extinctions, climate shifts, and the rise and fall of entire lineages of more complex animals. Their method works. Comb jellies take drifting to another level. Unlike true jellyfish, they move with rows of tiny cilia, shimmering with refracted light. In the blackness, they appear like rainbows passing through the water, fragile yet mesmerizing. Their movements are slow, never hurried, conserving energy while their sticky tentacles gather prey. Some species have evolved elaborate lobes that extend outward, increasing their surface area and catching more particles as they drift. They are wanderers in the purest sense, guided not by purpose but by the endless pull of the water around them. Siphonophores also belong among the drifters, though they are colonies rather than individuals. Each siphonophore is a chain of specialized members, some for movement, some for feeding, some for reproduction. Together they create forms that can stretch for dozens of meters, moving with the current like living veils. Some produce light in coordinated pulses, others extend long tentacles that hang silently, invisible until they ensnare prey. They are not predators in the traditional sense. They are trappers, letting the sea deliver meals into their waiting nets. To drift is not to be idle. It is to set a stage and wait for the inevitable. Plankton, though tiny, are perhaps the greatest of all wanderers. They make up an enormous fraction of life in the ocean, drifting in every depth from the surface down into the dark. Some are single-celled organisms, others are larvae of larger creatures. In the midnight zone, plankton rain down from above in the form of marine snow, flakes of organic matter, fecal pellets, bits of dead organisms that sustain the deep. Without plankton drifting endlessly through the water, the midnight zone would starve. Though each particle is small, together they form the foundation of this entire ecosystem. But drifting is not limited to small or delicate beings. Even large animals can be wanderers. Consider the oarfish, that long ribbon-like giant. Though capable of swimming with sinuous waves of its body, it often drifts through the water column, rising and falling with currents. Its size is impressive, but its strategy is simple. Conserve energy, avoid unnecessary effort. Let the sea carry it where it will. This is the same principle seen in countless smaller creatures, magnified into a form so large that it becomes legend. The wanderers are not directionless, though. Many have rhythms tied to the daily cycle of the ocean. Each night, billions of creatures migrate upward towards shallower waters to feed, then return to the deep before dawn. It is the largest migration on Earth, occurring every day without fail, yet invisible to us on land. Lanternfish, shrimp, and countless others take part, drifting upward with the safety of darkness, then sinking again when the risk of daylight returns. To wander here is to be part of a global tide of life, rising and falling with the sun they never see directly. Some wanderers are scavengers, drifting until they encounter the remains of larger animals sinking from above. Whale carcasses, dead fish, and fragments of surface life all find their way downward. For many creatures, these falls are rare feasts, concentrated bursts of energy in an otherwise scarce environment. Amphipods swarm onto carcasses, stripping them clean. Isopods, enlarged into massive forms in the deep, crawl across the remains. Even worms and snails appear, drifting in from the black to feed. These wanderers do not hunt in the usual sense. They wait, they drift, they endure, and when the sea offers them food, they take it. The deep also holds drifters that remain mysterious. Delicate ribbons of gelatin, sometimes many meters long, have been filmed by submersibles, drifting without clear purpose, their forms unknown to science. Sometimes they are mistaken for new species, other times they are fragments of large colonies. Each sighting adds to the sense that the deep holds countless wanderers we have yet to identify, their existence hidden in the quiet motion of the water. Humans often imagine survival as a matter of action, of striving, of constant effort. In the deep, the drifters and wanderers remind us that survival can also mean yielding. By not resisting, by not wasting, by letting the currents provide, they thrive in their own way. Their lives may look passive, but they are no less adapted than the hunters or the giants. The ocean rewards efficiency, and drifting is one of the most efficient strategies of all. These beings also remind us of time on a different scale. Their movements are not hurried. They measure existence in slow pulses, in patient drifts, in long spans where nothing seems to change. To watch them is to watch life unbound by urgency. They are part of a rhythm older than us, older than the civilizations that tell stories about monsters in the deep. They wander without maps, without destinations, carried by the ocean itself, and in doing so, they survive in the most challenging habitat on Earth. The Midnight Zone is not filled only with fearsome predators or strange monsters. It is equally filled with wanderers, quiet presences that make up the fabric of this ecosystem. Without them, the hunters would starve, the giants would have no food, the cycle of life would collapse. They are the quiet foundation, invisible unless you look closely, patient and enduring. The sea carries them endlessly, and they in turn carry the story of survival forward. Down here, the surface world feels impossibly far away. The sun that drives all life above, the sun that shapes climates, feeds forests, and directs our own rhythms, has no influence in this place. For the creatures of the Midnight Zone, sunlight is not simply hidden. It is absent, irrelevant, something that has never mattered in the entire history of their existence. They live in a world without sunlight, and what is striking is not how empty it seems, but how full it actually is. To us, light is inseparable from life. Plants use it to grow, animals rely on it for warmth and orientation, and even our bodies respond to its daily cycle. Without it, we lose track of time, we struggle to sleep, we feel disoriented. But the deep sea rewrites those rules. Here, cycles are not set by sunrise or sunset. Time is measured in the slow fall of organic debris, in migrations rising and sinking, in rhythms that belong to darkness. For the beings that evolved here, there is no memory of a world with light. Their ancestors may have lived closer to the surface long ago, but over countless generations they adapted to the black until the sun became irrelevant. Their vision shifted, sometimes toward extreme sensitivity, sometimes disappearing altogether. Their bodies evolved chemical lanterns, organs for detecting faint vibrations, senses that would mean little to us but mean survival here. This is not a place lacking life. It is a place where life has found new rules to thrive under. Without sunlight, food is not created locally through photosynthesis. It must come from above or from chemical processes near vents and seeps. The steady rain of marine snow, microscopic particles of organic matter drifting downward, is the main source of energy for most. Every flake is a fragment of the surface world, a reminder of ecosystems far above. To the animals here, each particle matters. Shrimp, fish, worms, and jellies all feed on this slow fall, forming the base of food chains in a place cut off from the sun. What seems like dust to us is a feast to them. But sometimes larger gifts fall. Carcasses of fish, squid, and even whales sink into the Midnight Zone. When a whale falls, it is an event that can feed communities for decades. First scavengers strip the flesh, then worms burrow into the bones, bacteria thrive in the marrow, and entire ecosystems bloom around the remains. These falls are rare, but they remind us that even in a world without sunlight, life adapts to sudden abundance, building complexity from the rare moments when the surface delivers more than snow. Some creatures have learned not to rely on falling matter at all. Near hydrothermal vents and cold seeps, where chemicals pour into the water from beneath the Earth's crust, life flourishes without sunlight. Bacteria and archaea use chemical energy instead of light, forming the base of unique food webs. Tube worms, clams, and shrimp live in symbiosis with these microbes, their bodies housing entire colonies that produce food internally. These ecosystems are like islands of abundance in an otherwise sparse desert, proving that sunlight is not required for complex life to exist. In a world without sunlight, survival depends on different senses. Eyes, if they exist, are often massive, designed to catch faint bioluminescence. In some animals, eyes shrink or vanish, replaced by sensitivity to pressure or motion. Some fish detect electric fields. Some crustaceans feel vibrations through long antennae. What we think of as secondary senses become primary. To imagine their perception is to imagine a way of experiencing the world entirely different from our own. Colour is another concept that vanishes without the sun. At shallower depths, light filters out in stages, red disappearing first, then orange, yellow and green. By the time you reach the midnight zone, only blue remains, and even that fades quickly. Many animals appear black or transparent, shapes without colour. Others glow in blues and greens, shades that match the wavelengths that travel farthest. Red becomes rare, almost secret, used by a few species as invisible illumination or private communication. For most, the idea of colour is meaningless. Their lives unfold in shades of black punctuated only by sparks of their own making. The absence of sunlight also changes behaviour. Migration patterns are not tied to day and night in the same way they are at the surface. Instead, many creatures rise and fall with the faint cues of darkness and temperature. Every evening, billions move upward to feed in shallower waters, then return before dawn, guided not by light they can see, but by rhythms written into their biology. This vertical migration is the largest movement of biomass on the planet, yet it happens unseen, driven entirely by instincts honed in darkness. The lack of sunlight does not mean silence. Sound travels far in the deep sea, sometimes farther than on the surface. Low-frequency noises from storms, earthquakes, and even human ships filter down into the midnight zone. Animals here may rely on these vibrations to sense distant changes. Whales dive into these depths, using sound to communicate across entire oceans. The absence of light amplifies the importance of every other signal. To live in this world is to be attuned to what the sun never touches. What is perhaps most striking about a world without sunlight is how it forces us to reconsider what is necessary for life. On land, we imagine photosynthesis as the foundation. We build our assumptions about habitability on access to light. Yet the midnight zone shows us that life can flourish under completely different conditions. As long as there is energy, whether in falling organic matter or chemical reactions, life will find a way to organise itself, to build bodies, to feed, to reproduce. The sun is not universal. It is just one source of energy among many. For humans, the idea of living without sunlight feels impossible. We are creatures of the surface, our sleep and waking cycles tuned to brightness, our cultures shaped by day and night. But here, none of that matters. Darkness is not an absence, it is a constant. The animals of the midnight zone do not need dawn to wake them, or twilight to guide them. They exist outside the rhythm we take for granted. Their lives are not lesser for it. They are simply different, written in a script that ignores the sun entirely. When submersibles descend into these depths, their lights create artificial suns. The sudden beams reveal what is usually unseen, startling animals that have never known brightness. Cameras capture ghostly shapes, glowing sparks, and immense shadows, but these are intrusions. The true nature of the midnight zone is invisible to us, because to experience it as it really is would require abandoning light altogether. We can only glimpse it with tools, and those tools distort what we see. A world without sunlight challenges us to think beyond our own limits. If life can thrive here, it may thrive elsewhere in the universe, in oceans beneath the ice of distant moons, in places where no star penetrates. The midnight zone is not just an alien world on our own planet. It is a model for what life beyond Earth might look like. Its existence proves that sunlight is not a requirement, only one path among many. To drift through this black expanse in imagination is to recognise that life does not end where light ends. It continues, reshaping itself in ways that defy our expectations. The creatures here are not weaker for lacking the sun. They are testaments to resilience, to the endless capacity of biology to invent, to adapt, to thrive where we thought it could not. A world without sunlight is not a barren void. It is a place where survival takes forms, stranger and more inventive than anything we see above. And as we sink deeper into it, the darkness feels less like emptiness and more like another kind of abundance, hidden from us but constant all the same. In the midnight zone, every detail of existence is shaped by necessity. There are no wasted movements, no luxuries of abundance, no room for mistakes. To live here is to practice survival as an art, not as an act of desperation, but as a discipline refined over millions of years. Each creature that drifts through the black water is a testament to strategies that work, to adaptations that answer challenges we can barely imagine. Survival here begins with energy. Without sunlight, food is never guaranteed, and what does arrive from above comes in fragments and irregular bursts. Marine snow drifts down like dust, flakes of dead plankton, fecal matter, bits of shells and skin. It may look insignificant, but it is the foundation of the deep. Tiny organisms filter it from the water, gathering what they can. Larger creatures feed on those smaller ones, layering a chain of survival built on the smallest of gifts. Nothing is wasted. Even waste itself becomes food, passing energy from one life to another in a slow cycle that defines the midnight zone. When a larger body falls, a fish, a squid, a whale, the rules shift. These rare events are like banquets in the black. Scavengers arrive first, shrimp and amphipods swarming to strip the soft tissues. Then larger predators take what they can, jaws unhinging to swallow pieces far beyond what their bodies seem able to contain. Over time, worms and snails move in, bacteria flourish, and even bones are broken down. A single fall may feed an entire community for decades. The art of survival here is not only in finding food, but in making use of every possible scrap when abundance comes. Predation itself takes forms designed for efficiency. Ambush is more common than pursuit. Why waste energy chasing when you can wait? Anglerfish dangle lures that glow just brightly enough to draw prey. Gulper eels open mouths so large they can engulf anything that happens to drift near. Dragonfish use their invisible red lights to hunt in ways others cannot detect. Each predator has perfected a strategy that maximizes success while minimizing effort. In the midnight zone, the fastest hunter is not the most successful. The cleverest, the most patient, the most efficient is. Defense is also art. Without hiding places, without reefs or kelp or sandbanks, creatures must protect themselves in other ways. Some vanish through transparency, bodies so clear they are almost indistinguishable from the water itself. Others become mirrors, reflecting the faintest light from above. Some produce blinding bursts of bioluminescence, startling predators long enough to escape. Still others cover themselves in black so deep it absorbs almost all light, rendering them invisible even to the most sensitive eyes. The goal is always the same: not to be noticed, not to be eaten, not to waste precious energy in a futile chase. Reproduction is perhaps the most delicate part of survival in this world. Encounters between members of the same species can be rare. The distances are vast, the densities low, and the chance of finding a partner uncertain. Many animals release eggs and sperm directly into the water, relying on sheer numbers to ensure that some will meet. Others develop more unusual solutions. The male anglerfish, for instance, latches onto the female when he finds her, fusing his body to hers until he becomes a permanent attachment. His tissues merge into hers, his organs shrink, and eventually he is little more than a source of sperm sustained by her blood supply. It may look grotesque to us, but in an environment where finding another mate may never happen again, it is ingenious. Other species rely on light as a means of attraction. Tiny crustaceans release glowing trails, males crafting luminous displays that females recognize. Squid pulse in sequences that may be signals for courtship. though we've only begun to understand their meaning. Invisibility and silence dominate much of the midnight zone, but when reproduction demands it, animals risk being seen. To continue their lineage, they must break the rule of concealment, at least briefly. Survival is not only about the individual, it is about ensuring the future of the species. The art of survival is also in resilience to extremes. Pressure here would crush most organisms, but the creatures of the midnight zone have bodies without fragile cavities. Many lack air-filled spaces entirely, their tissues dense and flexible. Proteins and enzymes in their cells are adapted to work under immense force, stabilized by unique molecules. Their membranes remain fluid where ours would freeze. To them, the crushing weight of the deep is not a challenge, but the only reality they know. Temperature, too, is part of the equation. The water of the midnight zone is cold, near freezing, and yet life endures. Slow metabolisms, efficient energy use, and the ability to go long stretches without feeding allow animals to survive in conditions that would be unbearable to most surface creatures. Some migrate to warmer waters during feeding excursions, rising at night to hunt before retreating again. Others stay in the cold permanently, their bodies tuned to work best where heat is absent. Even communication becomes an art in survival. Light is used not only for hunting or defence, but also for signalling. Some creatures have species-specific patterns of photophores, glowing dots arranged like codes only their own kind can read. Others pulse in synchronized rhythms, patterns that may mean attraction, warning or cooperation. To us, these lights look like decoration. To them, they are sentences written in sparks. Survival in the midnight zone is also about endurance. Many animals here live longer than their shallow water relatives. With slower metabolisms and less energy spent on constant activity, lifespans stretch out. Some deep-sea fish may live for decades, their slow growth and adaptation to scarcity. They do not rush through life, they extend it, taking what they need slowly, carefully, patiently. Humans sometimes think of the deep as hostile, as though it is actively resisting life. But the creatures that live here show us another truth. It is not hostility that defines the midnight zone, it is demand. Every adaptation is a response to demand, every survival strategy an answer to necessity. Life here is art because it is precise. Waste is not tolerated, excess is rare, balance is everything. This precision also means diversity. No single solution dominates. Some animals glow, some hide, some grow enormous, some remain tiny. Some are hunters, some are scavengers, some are parasites, some are symbiotic partners. Each strategy works, not because it is perfect, but because it fits into the larger puzzle. The art of survival is not about a single masterpiece. It is about an endless gallery of different forms, each crafted by the pressure, the darkness, and the scarcity of the deep. And what stands out most is that none of it is accidental. Evolution has carved these strategies over millions of years, testing, discarding, refining. The creatures we see are those whose ancestors succeeded, who found ways to endure long enough to reproduce, whose adaptations gave them just enough advantage to persist. Every glowing lure, every transparent body, every oversized jaw is part of that long lineage of experimentation. The midnight zone is not just a place of survival, it is a living archive of solutions, each one a work of necessity made into form. To imagine drifting through this space is to see not emptiness, but ingenuity. It is to recognize that life, when stripped of light and abundance, does not fade. It transforms. It turns scarcity into invention, darkness into communication, pressure into strength. The art of survival in the midnight zone is not dramatic. It is quiet, patient, relentless. It is written into every body that moves through the black, every flash of light, every moment of stillness. And as the journey continues, that art surrounds us, reminding us that life endures not by resisting its environment, but by becoming part of it completely. Down here in the midnight zone, time itself feels different. On the surface, we live by schedules, by alarms, by the rising and setting of the sun. Our days are measured in hours, our lives in calendars, our memories in seasons. In the deep sea, none of that exists. There is no sunrise to announce a morning, no sunset to signal an evening, no cycle of daylight to divide hours into familiar patterns. In a place where the sun never penetrates, the very idea of time begins to dissolve, leaving behind a different rhythm altogether. For us, it is difficult to imagine life without timekeepers. We look at clocks dozens of times each day. We structure everything from meals to work to sleep around minutes and hours. We're not simply guided by time, we're ruled by it. Yet the creatures of the midnight zone live in an environment where time is not measured in numbers. Their lives are written in cues that are subtle, slow, and often unpredictable. Theirs is a world without a clock, and somehow it works. One of the few cycles that matters here is the rain of marine snow. Every flake that drifts downward is a piece of time. It represents a moment from above, a bloom of plankton, a school of fish feeding, a storm stirring up the water. For the deep-sea animals that depend on this slow fall, each particle is a marker, a small sign that the world above has shifted. They may not measure hours, but they live in rhythms of scarcity and abundance, moments when food arrives and long stretches when it does not. Time is hunger and waiting, patience and chance. Another cycle is the great daily migration of creatures rising towards shallower water at night and sinking again before dawn. Billions take part, making it the largest movement of life on Earth. But those in the deep do not measure it in minutes or hours. They feel it in patterns of motion around them, in currents stirred by the upward swim of countless bodies, in the faint sounds and vibrations that ripple through the water column. Time here is not about numbers. It is about movement, about the living tide of animals shifting up and down every day without a single clock to guide them. Some animals in the midnight zone may still hold remnants of biological clocks tied to light, inherited from ancestors that live closer to the surface. But over generations, those rhythms have faded or changed. Where sunlight cannot reach, circadian rhythms may blur, becoming less distinct. Instead, creatures tune themselves to other signals, pressure changes, chemical cues, temperature shifts. A whale passing through may stir the water, marking time for the smaller creatures that sense its wake. The distant fall of a carcass may mark a season of plenty. Time is measured not by regularity, but by events. To humans, this absence of measurable time is disorienting. When divers descend, even for short distances, they lose track of minutes. Submersible pilots often describe the sensation of being suspended in an eternal present, unable to sense how long they have been drifting in darkness. Without the sun, without clocks, the mind struggles to hold on to a framework. In the deep, time stretches and compresses. A few minutes may feel like hours, hours may feel like days. It is easy to imagine that for the animals here, time is not something they perceive at all, only something we impose from the outside. Yet time does exist even here. It simply wears a different face. For many deep-sea creatures, survival depends on stretching their lives across decades. Slow metabolisms and reduced activity mean they age more gradually than their shallow water relatives. Some deep-sea fish may live for more than a century, growing so slowly that change is nearly invisible. Their perception of time, if it exists, must be vastly different from ours. What we would call an entire lifetime may be only a portion of theirs, measured not in busy days, but in endless seasons of stillness and drift. The absence of light also affects how generations unfold. For animals that release eggs and larvae into the water, development can take months or even years, guided not by day and night, but by chemical signals and slow growth. Juveniles drift before settling into adult forms, their journey shaped by currents rather than by clocks. Entire lineages unfold in blackness, each generation passing on strategies of survival without ever knowing a sunrise. Time is not history here. It is continuity, a thread stretching through darkness unbroken by daylight. Even predators and prey experience time differently. An ambush hunter like the anglerfish may wait motionless for hours, days, or longer, conserving energy until something passes close enough to catch. For the fish that finally drifts near, the moment is sudden, violent, final. But for the anglerfish, it is only one instant in a long stretch of stillness. In a world without clocks, patience becomes the measure of time. Waiting is not delay, it is existence. When scientists bring back footage from the deep, one of the most striking things is how slow everything appears. Jellyfish pulse gently, their bells rising and falling without urgency. Squid hover silently, tentacles drifting like threads. Fish move carefully, conserving energy, never wasting speed unless absolutely necessary. Part of this slowness is real, a reflection of survival in scarcity. Part of it may be perception, as our eyes are accustomed to constant movement and change. But either way, the deep feels timeless, suspended outside the rush that defines our world above. And yet, the midnight zone is not immune to change. Time leaves its marks in other ways. Sediment on the seafloor builds slowly, layer upon layer of particles drifting down. In these layers, scientists can read the history of the ocean. Volcanic eruptions, storms, climate shifts, even traces of human activity. To us, these layers are timelines, each one a record of years or centuries. To the creatures living above them, they are simply the ground beneath their bodies, unnoticed, irrelevant. The seafloor remembers what the animals do not. Time also arrives in the form of migrations from outside. Whales dive deep to hunt squid, carrying with them rhythms from the surface. Their presence is both sudden and regular, a kind of clock imposed on the deep. For the squid, the arrival of whales is not measured in dates or years. It is experienced as survival or death, as another rhythm of danger passing through. To them, time is not abstract. It is immediate, embodied in the sudden appearance of predators or the long absence of food. The absence of sunlight also means the absence of seasons as we know them. On land, plants bloom, leaves fall, snow comes and goes. In the deep, temperature remains almost constant. Darkness never shifts. The creatures here do not experience spring or winter. Their seasons are defined by different rhythms. A plankton bloom far above that increases marine snow, a rare carcass fall that feeds entire communities, a volcanic vent opening or closing on the seafloor. These are the seasons of the midnight zone, irregular and unpredictable, but just as real to those who live here as summer and winter are to us. What emerges from all of this is a picture of life existing outside the framework we take for granted. Time without a clock is not chaos, it is a different order, one written in patience, in endurance, in subtle signals. To us it may feel alien, disorienting, even impossible to imagine. But to the creatures of the deep, it is the only reality they have ever known. They do not need hours and days. Their survival depends on cycles we barely recognize. The fall of food, the drift of currents, the rare encounters with others of their kind. For humans, the idea of time without a clock raises questions beyond biology. If life can thrive in such conditions, perhaps our own attachment to time is not as universal as we believe. Perhaps time, as we measure it, is only one version of reality, tied to the sun and the cycles of the surface. The midnight zone reminds us that life does not require clocks. It requires adaptation, resilience, patience. Time is not a number on a dial. It is the rhythm of existence itself, and that rhythm changes depending on where you live. To drift through this world is to let go of our own markers, to imagine life where waiting is not wasted, where generations stretch across centuries, where every moment is shaped not by hours but by survival. A world without a clock is not a world without order. It is simply a world where order looks different, where survival itself is the only measure that matters. In the midnight zone, silence is never truly silence. The absence of sunlight has taken away one form of communication, but the darkness has opened another. The ocean is not empty of voices. It is filled with languages we're only beginning to decipher, conversations that take place in light, in sound, in vibration, in chemicals we cannot sense. To us it feels alien, but to the creatures here, it is the ordinary rhythm of life. This is the language of the abyss, and it is spoken by everything that survives in its black waters. For many, light is the first medium. Bioluminescence is not decoration but vocabulary. Flashes, pulses and glows form signals as clear to their receivers as words are to us. A lantern fish glowing with a specific pattern of photophores is not simply shining. It may be identifying itself to a mate, warning rivals, or concealing its outline from predators. A squid releasing a sudden burst of bioluminescent ink is sending a different kind of message. A warning, a distraction, a command for attention before vanishing into darkness. Even the steady glow of a siphonophore colony may serve as a statement of presence, its length illuminated like a chain of beacons drifting through the dark. Each signal carries risk. To glow is to be noticed, and to be noticed is to be vulnerable. That is why the language of the abyss is often subtle, fleeting, whispered rather than shouted. Some species can control their photophores with precision, flashing in short bursts that disappear almost instantly, like Morse code tapped on water. Others shape patterns along their bodies, stripes or dots that appear only briefly. We struggle to read them, but to the animals themselves these flickers may be sentences as complex as any spoken phrase. Sound is another form of communication. In the deep sea, sound travels farther than light, carrying through the dense water with remarkable efficiency. Whales use this property to sing songs that cross entire oceans. Their calls descend into the midnight zone, filling it with low-frequency vibrations that we can record but cannot fully understand. To them, these songs may be declarations of territory, invitations to mates, or signals to companions across distances unimaginable to us. Smaller animals use sound too, though not always in ways obvious to us. Some fish produce clicks or grunts, vibrations that ripple through the water. Crustaceans snap claws or rub body parts together, creating signals too faint for us to hear without instruments, but easily detected by others of their kind. Even movements themselves can serve as language. A sudden flick of a fin, a ripple of water, a shift in position may all carry meaning in the blackness. Chemical signals also shape communication in the abyss. Some creatures release pheromones into the water, leaving trails that others can follow. These invisible cues may guide mates together or warn rivals away. In a place where encounters are rare, chemical messages can linger, carrying meaning long after the sender has drifted on. To us, they are undetectable. To the animals here, they are another layer of language, one more thread in the complex fabric of interaction. The language of the abyss is not limited to one medium at a time. Often it is layered, one signal reinforcing another. A fish may glow faintly while also releasing chemical cues, ensuring that its message is understood. A squid may flash light while shifting its posture, combining visual and physical signals. This redundancy increases the chance of being understood in an environment where misunderstanding can be fatal. We are only beginning to understand how complex these languages may be. Researchers recording the deep often notice patterns, repeated sequences of light, regular rhythms of sound, that suggest more than random activity. Some speculate that bioluminescent displays could serve the same functions as bird songs on land: territory, courtship, warning, recognition. If so, then the abyss is filled with conversation, a chorus of glows and pulses we have barely begun to interpret. There are even suggestions that some creatures may communicate across species. Predators sometimes mimic the lights of harmless animals to lure prey. If prey animals learn to recognize and avoid such patterns, then an arms race of communication begins. one side inventing deception, the other inventing recognition. The abyss becomes not only a place of survival, but a battlefield of language, each flicker carrying layers of meaning between hunter and hunted. What makes this communication remarkable is that it exists without reference to sunlight. On the surface, vision is shaped by the sun, sound by air, seasons by cycles of light and dark. In the deep, none of those rules apply. Language has evolved independently, shaped by darkness and pressure. It is a reminder that communication is not limited to human speech, or even to the senses we know. It can arise wherever life needs to interact, taking forms that fit the environment. For us, trying to imagine this language is difficult. Our own senses are too limited. We cannot see most bioluminescence without special equipment, cannot hear the full range of sounds, cannot detect the chemical signals at all. We are outsiders, trying to translate a language without knowing its grammar. Yet even with fragments, the picture is striking. The abyss is not silent. It is full of voices, each adapted to speak in darkness. When submersibles descend, their lights and engines intrude on this language. Animals scatter, signals are interrupted, patterns are broken. What we record is often distorted, an echo of what is really happening when no one is watching. The true conversations of the abyss are hidden from us, continuing endlessly in the dark, invisible to our clumsy attempts to listen. Still, what we do know is enough to change how we think about communication. If creatures can build languages out of flashes and vibrations, then language itself is not unique to us. It is a natural consequence of survival, a way for life to connect in any environment. The abyss proves that words are only one form among many, that meaning can be carried in glows, in pulses, in trails of chemicals drifting invisibly through water. The language of the abyss is also a reminder of how much we do not know. Every dive into the deep reveals new patterns, signals that defy explanation, displays that suggest complexity we cannot yet decode. Perhaps in time, with better tools, we will learn to interpret these flashes as sentences, these pulses as messages. For now, we can only marvel at the fact that in a world without light, life has invented so many ways to speak. To drift through this place is to be surrounded by invisible conversation. Every spark may be a greeting, every sound a warning, every vibration a call. The abyss is alive with voices, but they are not ours. They belong to the creatures that have lived here for millions of years, shaping their language in darkness, speaking in ways we're only beginning to hear. The Midnight Zone is not only a place of science. For as long as people have looked out across the sea, they have filled its depths with imagination. Long before anyone could descend into the black, stories grew about what might live there, and those stories still echo in our culture. The abyss has always been a canvas for human fear and wonder, a space we could not see but could not stop thinking about. What we imagine in the dark often says as much about us as it does about the ocean itself. Sailors were among the first to give shape to these ideas. To them, the ocean was both livelihood and danger, a force that fed them and threatened to swallow them whole. When ships vanished, when storms pulled crews into the deep, the explanations often turned to monsters. Gigantic squids with arms long enough to wrap around entire vessels, serpents that slithered just beneath the waves, creatures with eyes glowing from the blackness, all became part of the lore of the sea. These were not idle tales. They were ways to explain a world that remained inaccessible, a world that resisted measurement or certainty. Legends of the Kraken grew out of sightings of giant squid, animals that really do rise from the depths but were rarely seen alive until modern times. Fishermen who found tentacles washed ashore or scars on whales filled in the blanks with imagination. The abyss was not simply dark water, it was a realm where monsters waited. In those early centuries, the Midnight Zone was less a scientific frontier than a stage for myth. Writers and artists built on these ideas. In literature, the deep sea became a symbol of mystery, fear, and the unknown. Jules Verne imagined submarines facing massive creatures beneath the waves in 20,000 Leagues Under the Seas. Later writers used the ocean as a metaphor for the subconscious, a place where hidden thoughts and desires lurked just out of reach. The Midnight Zone became not only a physical place but a psychological one, a mirror of the fears and fascinations that humans carry within. Even today, when science has given us clearer glimpses of the deep, imagination continues to shape how we see it. Documentaries often portray the abyss as alien, filling narration with comparisons to outer space. Filmmakers design monsters for science fiction that borrow features from anglerfish, squids, and transparent jellies. The Midnight Zone is still treated as a place beyond our world, even though it lies beneath our own oceans. Our minds cannot resist turning it into a frontier for storytelling, but the echoes in imagination are not only about fear, they're also about awe. People standing on beaches at night watching bioluminescence glow in the waves have always been struck by the idea that the ocean carries its own stars. The idea that entire realms beneath the surface shine with their own lights has fueled not only myths, but inspiration. Painters, composers, and poets have drawn from the mystery of the deep, trying to capture the sense of being surrounded by darkness, alive with unseen voices. For scientists, imagination has played its role too. Before submersibles, before cameras, researchers could only guess what lived below. Their guesses were often extravagant. Drawings of fish with exaggerated teeth, creatures with bizarre appendages, forms that seemed more like nightmares than biology. Some of those guesses turned out to be accurate, others wildly wrong, but the act of imagining helped push exploration forward. It gave shape to the questions that would later drive expeditions. The abyss was not studied only with instruments, it was also studied with stories. Even now, the line between imagination and observation remains blurry. Submersible footage sometimes captures flashes of light or shadowy shapes that cannot be explained. Scientists release images of animals so strange they might as well be inventions. Fish with mouths like cages, jellies that unravel into glowing ribbons, siphonophores longer than whales. Each new discovery feels like something dreamt before it was seen. In this way, imagination and reality circle each other, each fueling the other's growth. The echoes in human imagination also reveal our fascination with the idea of the alien. We often think of space as the final frontier, but in truth, the ocean's depths are equally foreign. That is why science fiction set on other planets so often borrows from the sea. Creatures with glowing bodies, transparent skin, or immense eyes are not entirely invented. They are echoes of the Midnight Zone transplanted into distant galaxies. Our vision of the alien is rooted in what we already know about the abyss. Cultural myths show the same patterns. From Japan's tales of sea dragons to Norse stories of the Midgard serpent, from Polynesian legends of deities dwelling in the ocean to Caribbean stories of spirits beneath the waves, the deep has always been populated with beings larger than life. The Midnight Zone, though never seen directly, was never thought of as empty. People filled it with gods, demons, and guardians. Each culture heard the silence of the deep and filled it with its own language. As technology expanded, imagination adapted. The invention of sonar and deep-sea exploration in the 20th century changed how people pictured the abyss. Instead of endless monsters, the focus shifted to mystery. Strange signals recorded by hydrophones, unidentified noises echoing across entire basins. These sounds became legends in themselves, names like the Bloop or Julia. Unexplained noises that stirred speculation of creatures larger than anything yet known. Even with more data, imagination still found space to expand, creating possibilities beyond the limits of evidence. Children grow up hearing stories of the deep, whether from fairy tales, films, or books. For many, the first introduction to the abyss comes not through science but through fiction. Animated films feature glowing fish with dangling lures, novels describe encounters with beasts in the black, games design levels filled with eerie shadows and sudden predators. These echoes shape how people feel about the ocean long before they learn about the reality of the midnight zone. The line between myth and fact remains porous, and the abyss continues to thrive as both a scientific mystery and a cultural one. What is striking is how enduring these echoes are. Even as science provides more answers, the imagination does not fade. It adapts, reshaping itself around the new discoveries. The anglerfish, once feared as a monster of invention, is now real, but that reality only deepens its power in storytelling. Transparent jellies and siphonophores longer than whales are not inventions either, but they fit seamlessly into the myths we already carried. The abyss continues to be both studied and dreamt, a space of data and a space of stories. This blending may be inevitable. The midnight zone resists complete understanding, and where knowledge leaves gaps, imagination rushes in. Even when we know more, the strangeness of what we find still feels unreal, still demands narrative. We cannot look at a creature with a glowing lure or a body stretched into a living ribbon without thinking it looks like something imagined. The abyss keeps echoing back our own need to create meaning from the unknown. For humans, the language of myth and the language of science are not enemies here. They are layers of the same fascination. Both say the same thing in different ways. The deep is a place of wonder. Whether filled with gods, monsters, or delicate jellies, it draws us because it is hidden, because it is vast, because it resists belonging to us. The echoes in our imagination are not distortions. They are reflections of our desire to connect to a place we cannot enter freely. To think of the abyss only as a physical habitat misses this deeper truth. It is also a cultural one, a stage for human creativity. The midnight zone lives not only in the black waters of the earth, but in our collective minds, where it has always been a frontier of possibility. As long as there are stories, the abyss will echo within them, reminding us that the unknown is as much about imagination as it is about discovery. For most of human history, the midnight zone was only a place of speculation, imagined in stories and feared in silence. No one could descend to such depths. The pressure alone would have crushed wooden ships and even early steel vessels like fragile shells. The darkness was absolute, the cold unbearable, the scale of the ocean far beyond the reach of human eyes. Yet curiosity has always driven us to the edges of what seems impossible, and eventually we found ways to descend into the black. The explorers of the midnight zone are not only the individuals who took those journeys, but also the machines, the instruments, and the ideas that made those descents possible. The first explorations were indirect. Scientists in the 19th century lowered nets and dredges into the sea, pulling up creatures that astonished them. Strange fish with enormous eyes, delicate jellies that collapsed on the way up, brittle stars, shrimps, and worms that seemed too alien to belong to the same earth. Some refused to believe these animals lived at great depths. They assumed the nets had drifted into shallower waters. But as expeditions grew more ambitious, the evidence became undeniable. Life thrived in places where no sunlight could reach. One of the great turning points came in the mid-20th century with the bathyscaphe Trieste. In 1960, Jacques Picard and Don Walsh descended into the Mariana Trench, reaching nearly 11 kilometres below the surface. The Trieste was not graceful. It was a steel sphere attached to a massive float filled with gasoline, chosen because it was lighter than water and resistant to compression. The descent took nearly 5 hours, the two men squeezed into a cabin just 2 metres across. Outside, the pressure was more than 1,000 times what we experience at sea level, enough to crush submarines if not built for the task. And yet they made it. And at the bottom, they saw life, a flatfish, shrimp-like creatures, proof that even in the greatest darkness, existence persisted. Their journey was a statement that the midnight zone and beyond could be reached, that it was not beyond human presence. Since then, exploration has advanced through technology more than through direct human descent. Submersibles became more sophisticated, with thick acrylic windows and robotic arms. Remote-operated vehicles, or ROVs, allowed scientists to see and manipulate the deep without risking lives. Cameras capable of withstanding immense pressure revealed creatures in their natural habitats, glowing, drifting, hunting in ways never imagined. The Midnight Zone shifted from myth to study, from silence to recorded image. Still, every descent carries with it a sense of awe. The first time a team sends a submersible into the black, there is a moment when the last traces of sunlight vanish and the lights of the vehicle are the only brightness left. The feeling is like leaving Earth entirely. Pilots describe the sense of floating in space, of drifting through a void that feels infinite. And then, gradually, the lights reveal what has always been there. Fish with transparent heads, squid flashing brief signals, jellies pulsing like living lanterns. Each encounter is a discovery. Each dive feels like entering another world. Exploration is not only about sight. Instruments record temperature, salinity, pressure, and chemical composition. Hydrophones capture the sounds of whales, earthquakes, and even the faint clicks of fish. Water samplers bring back evidence of bacteria and plankton invisible to the eye. Each piece of data is part of the puzzle, helping to map an ecosystem too vast for us to know directly. But technology does more than observe. It allows us to ask questions we never could before. What happens when a carcass falls into the Midnight Zone? ROVs have recorded scavengers arriving within minutes, shrimp and amphipods swarming, fish circling, entire communities appearing from the darkness as though waiting. What happens near hydrothermal vents? Cameras reveal oases of life, tube worms stretching meters long, crabs and shrimp clustered in thousands. These recordings transform speculation into evidence, imagination into understanding. The explorers of the Midnight Zone are not only scientists and machines, they are also the animals themselves, the ones who rise from the deep and meet us halfway. Whales are the most dramatic of these travellers. Sperm whales dive more than a kilometre down to hunt giant squid, holding their breath for over an hour, navigating and hunting in the black with sonar. Their journeys connect the surface with the depths, carrying knowledge of both worlds in their bodies. When they return scarred from battles, they bring with them proof of the giants below. They are explorers long before us, adapted to do what we can only achieve with machines. Even smaller creatures are explorers in their own way. Lanternfish, rising each night from the Midnight Zone to feed closer to the surface, travel distances that, scaled to their size, are as extraordinary as any human voyage. Shrimp, jellies, and squid join them, creating a vertical migration that dwarfs all human expeditions in scale. Every night the deep itself moves, billions of lives crossing boundaries we once thought impassable. Their exploration is not driven by curiosity but by survival, yet it shapes the planet as surely as any discovery mission. For humans, exploration is always tied to story. Each dive into the abyss carries echoes of past legends. Each strange creature becomes a headline. Anglerfish, gulper eels, dragonfish, siphonophores, all have made their way into books, documentaries, and museums. The Midnight Zone is still portrayed as alien, as though we have not yet learned to accept it as part of our own Earth. Perhaps that is the allure. To explore here is to touch something that feels like another planet without leaving our own. The risks are still real. Pressure is unforgiving, currents unpredictable, and the distance is vast. Machines can fail, signals can be lost, storms above can cut missions short. Exploration of the deep is expensive, requiring ships, crews, and technology few nations can afford. That is why so much of the Midnight Zone remains unseen. Even with modern tools, we have mapped only fragments. We know the outlines of mountain ranges on Mars more clearly than the canyons of our own sea floor. Yet progress continues. Autonomous underwater vehicles now roam without tethers, mapping and recording as they drift. High-resolution cameras reveal details in darkness that once seemed impossible. New sensors detect life at the microbial level, tracing the chemistry of survival. With each advance, the Midnight Zone becomes less myth and more reality, though it never loses its sense of strangeness. The explorers are also artists, filmmakers and storytellers who bring the deep into culture. Without them, the images would remain locked in research archives. Instead, glowing creatures appear on screens, narrated for audiences who may never see the ocean at all. Exploration becomes not only a scientific act but a shared experience, a way to connect people to a world they did not know existed. The Midnight Zone becomes part of human imagination not only as myth but as fact. What is striking is that exploration never truly ends here. Each dive, each recording, each expedition brings back something unexpected. New species are described almost every time. Sometimes they are small, a shrimp, a worm, a jelly. Sometimes they are larger, new kinds of fish, strange cephalopods, siphonophores longer than any animal yet known. The abyss resists completion. It remains open, endless, always capable of surprising us. In that sense, the explorers of the Midnight Zone are part of a continuum. Sailors who told stories of monsters, scientists who dredged strange fish, pioneers who descended in steel spheres, engineers who built machines to map the dark, whales that dive to hunt giants, shrimp that migrate in billions. All are explorers, all part of the ongoing act of encountering the deep. To explore here is not to conquer, it is to witness, to learn, to admit that even on our own planet there are realms we barely know. The Midnight Zone is not a place of conquest, it is a place of humility. Each descent reminds us of scale, of fragility, of the limits of our reach. The explorers who enter it return changed, carrying with them not only data but perspective. The abyss does not yield easily, but it always gives back something: wonder, knowledge, questions that demand more. Exploration here is not a race toward an end. It is an ongoing dialogue with a world that was here long before us and will continue long after. For most of history, the deep sea was a place of speculation. People assumed that nothing could live where sunlight never reached, where the pressure was crushing, and where the cold seemed unbearable. The Midnight Zone was imagined as a barren wasteland, a lifeless desert beneath the waves. The discoveries of the past century have shattered that view. Each dive, each photograph, each specimen pulled from the black has revealed a world more complex, more alive, and more extraordinary than anyone dared to expect. These discoveries did not just add to our knowledge of the ocean, they changed how we see life itself. One of the earliest shifts came in the 19th century, when dredging expeditions pulled up animals from depths that were once thought sterile. The Challenger expedition of the 1870s remains one of the most important milestones. Over nearly 4 years, the crew circled the globe, sampling the seafloor, measuring temperature, recording currents, and dragging nets across depths never touched before. When those nets came back, they carried fish with enormous eyes, delicate corals, worms, shrimps, and jellies. The assumption that deep waters were empty collapsed in the face of evidence. The abyss was alive. The discovery was as revolutionary as the realization that other planets circle the sun. A realm once considered void was, in fact, teeming. Later, in the 20th century, submersibles brought more shocking revelations. The bathyscaphe Trieste's descent into the Mariana Trench in 1960 proved that life could exist even in the deepest places on Earth. Though their time on the seafloor was brief, the sight of shrimp-like creatures moving across the sediment silenced doubts that pressure set a hard limit on biology. It showed that life was more adaptable, more resilient than science had ever imagined. From that moment, the deep was no longer considered uninhabitable. It was simply unexplored. Perhaps the most groundbreaking discovery came in 1977, near the Galapagos Rift. Scientists using the submersible Alvin stumbled upon hydrothermal vents, cracks in the seafloor where superheated, mineral-rich water poured into the ocean. Around these vents was not emptiness but abundance. Giant tube worms taller than a person, clams the size of footballs, crabs, shrimp and fish clustered in dense communities. Until then, biology was thought to depend entirely on sunlight. Here was proof of another possibility. The base of this ecosystem was not photosynthesis but chemosynthesis, bacteria and archaea using chemicals like hydrogen sulfide to produce energy. It was life built on a foundation entirely separate from the sun. That discovery transformed not only ocean science, but also ideas about life beyond Earth. If biology could thrive in the black depths around vents, perhaps it could also thrive beneath the ice of distant moons in places where no sunlight ever shines. Another discovery that reshaped our view was the sheer scale of vertical migration. For decades, sonar operators noticed strange signals in the water column, layers that rose and fell with the day. At first, they thought it was the seafloor itself. Only later did they realise it was billions of organisms, as fish, shrimp, squid and more, moving upward each night to feed and sinking back each day. It is the largest migration on the planet, dwarfing the movements of birds or wildebeest, and it happens every single day, unseen by us above. The realisation that the midnight zone is not static but in constant motion changed how we understood the ocean's role in global cycles of carbon and energy. Bioluminescence has been another revelation. We always knew some animals glowed, but the true extent only became clear when cameras and submersibles captured the black water alive with sparks and pulses. Scientists now estimate that the majority of animals in the deep can produce light in some form. It is not rare, it is normal. The abyss is not dark at all when seen through the eyes of its inhabitants. It is filled with communication, deception, hunting, and signalling. What was once thought of as a silent void is actually a living conversation carried out in light. The discovery of giant squid, once legendary, also shifted our understanding. For centuries, stories of enormous tentacled creatures were dismissed as exaggeration. Then carcasses began to appear, then fragments in the stomachs of whales, and finally, in recent years, living giant squid were filmed in their natural habitat. What was once myth is now fact, and with it comes the recognition that our planet holds animals of scale and strangeness we still barely comprehend. Each sighting reminds us that the deep continues to hold mysteries large enough to fuel imagination. More subtle discoveries have been just as transformative. Transparent fish with heads like glass, revealing their organs inside, jellies with bodies like drifting sculptures, unravelling into delicate filaments, siphonophores stretching for dozens of metres, colonies acting as one. Each of these reveals not only the diversity of the deep, but also the ingenuity of evolution. Life does not just survive here, it thrives with creativity, finding solutions to problems in ways we never anticipated. Technology has amplified these discoveries. High-definition cameras capture details once invisible. Autonomous vehicles roam for weeks, sending back streams of data. Genetic analysis reveals new species hidden within samples we thought we already knew. The result is a steady stream of revelations, each one challenging the assumption that we have mapped or measured our planet completely. The ocean reminds us again and again that we are still beginners. These discoveries have ripple effects beyond marine biology. The idea of life without sunlight influences how astronomers search for habitable worlds. The understanding of vertical migrations reshapes climate science, showing how carbon is transported into the depths. The recognition of bioluminescence influences technology, inspiring new materials and communication systems. Even the study of deep-sea enzymes has medical implications, with proteins stable under pressure and cold offering potential for industry and health. The midnight zone is not just a curiosity, it is a source of knowledge that reaches into countless fields. What has perhaps changed most is perspective. The abyss is no longer imagined as lifeless or alien to Earth. It is recognised as the largest habitat on the planet, covering more area than forests, deserts and plains combined. Its creatures are not exceptions, but part of the majority of life's story. We are the unusual ones, living in sunlight on land. They are the norm, surviving in darkness under pressure. That reversal of view is as important as any single discovery. It forces us to see ourselves differently, to understand that life on Earth is broader and stranger than we once believed. And even with all these discoveries, what stands out is how much remains unknown. Scientists estimate that the vast majority of deep-sea species have not yet been described. Each expedition brings back new forms. Each camera dive records behaviours never seen before. The abyss continues to resist completion, always holding back more secrets. That endless potential for discovery is what keeps exploration alive, what keeps imagination tied to science, what keeps us returning to the black. The discoveries that have changed our view remind us of two truths. First, that the ocean is not empty. It is abundant, strange and essential. Second, that we are still at the beginning of understanding it. Every new fact is not a conclusion but an opening. The Midnight Zone is not simply one of Earth's habitats. It is a frontier, a reminder that mystery still exists, not in distant galaxies, but beneath the waves of our own planet. Even with all the advances in technology, even with submersibles that can reach the deepest trenches and cameras that can withstand pressures far beyond what the human body could endure, the Midnight Zone remains mostly unknown. What we have seen so far is only a fraction, a scattering of glimpses caught in brief moments of exploration. The secrets still hidden are larger than what we know, and that imbalance is part of what makes this part of the ocean feel inexhaustible. It is a reminder that the majority of our planet is still a mystery, not because we have not tried to look, but because the scale of what is hidden is so vast it resists being revealed all at once. The most obvious secret lies in the number of species we have yet to identify. Every time scientists send down a remotely operated vehicle or haul up a net, new forms appear. Some are tiny plankton, others are delicate jellies, sometimes they are fish or crustaceans never described before. The rate of new discoveries suggests that we have catalogued only a small percentage of what actually lives in the Midnight Zone. If the majority of the ocean is unexplored, then the majority of its inhabitants are as well. That means the true diversity of this habitat remains concealed, a living archive of forms that may take centuries to uncover. The behaviours of deep-sea animals are another hidden realm. Seeing a creature for a few seconds on a camera does not tell us how it lives. We may glimpse an anglerfish with its glowing lure, but we do not know how often it feeds, how long it waits between meals, how it finds a mate in the vastness of the dark. We may capture footage of a siphonophore glowing like a chain of stars, but we do not know how these colonies coordinate, how they respond to predators, how they regulate their growth. So much of what we assume about the deep comes from short encounters, fragments that hint at larger stories but do not reveal them fully. The secrets are not just in the creatures themselves, but in the rhythms of their lives, rhythms we have barely begun to understand. The seafloor of the Midnight Zone hides its own mysteries. Canyons, mountains, ridges and plains stretch for thousands of kilometres, yet we have mapped them only with low-resolution sonar. Whole ecosystems may exist there, isolated and unknown. Hydrothermal vents were discovered by accident, and since then, dozens more have been found, each supporting unique communities. But there are likely hundreds, perhaps thousands, still unrecorded. Cold seeps, where methane and other chemicals bubble from the seabed, are another hidden feature. They too support life in abundance, but most remain undiscovered. The architecture of the deep itself, its landscapes and the life that clings to them, is still largely concealed. There are also mysteries of scale. We know giant squid exist, but we do not know how many there are, how they reproduce, how they interact with each other. We know siphonophores can grow longer than whales, but we do not know how common they are, how old they become, or how far they drift in a lifetime. We know there are creatures that use red bioluminescence invisible to most others, but we do not know how many species share that secret or what messages they may be sending in colours only they can see. The secrets of the Midnight Zone are not limited to the unknown species. They include the unknown dimensions of the ones we already know. Another layer of secrecy lies in sound. Hydrophones have recorded unexplained noises in the deep. Long, low vibrations, sudden pulses, sounds that repeat in patterns but do not match any known animal or geological event. Some of these sounds have been explained over time as icebergs cracking or whales calling, but many remain without clear origin. They are reminders that in the darkness, communication and movement are happening constantly, far beyond our current ability to interpret. Each unexplained sound is a fragment of a hidden language still waiting to be translated. The role of the Midnight Zone in the planet's systems is also partly hidden. We know vertical migration moves carbon from the surface to the deep, but we do not know the full extent of how this process shapes climate. We know marine snow feeds countless organisms, but we do not know how its quality and quantity shift with changing oceans. We know carcasses falling to the seafloor sustain communities for decades, but we do not know how often such falls occur, how far their influence reaches, or what long-term cycles they create. These processes are not only secrets of the Midnight Zone, they are secrets that matter for the entire Earth, hidden in the blackness but shaping the surface world we live in. Even time itself hides secrets here. The lifespans of deep-sea creatures are often unknown. Some fish may live for centuries, others for only a few years. Growth rates are so slow and reproduction so rare that it is difficult to measure. Without knowing how long these animals live, we cannot know how stable their populations are, how vulnerable they may be to changes, or how long they have been part of the ecosystem. The abyss holds ancient lives, but their full timelines are still hidden from us. Part of why so many secrets remain is the challenge of exploration. Each descent requires expensive ships, specialized machines, and careful planning. The areas that can be studied are small compared to the size of the Midnight Zone. A single ROV dive may explore only a tiny section of seafloor, and then it may take years to analyse the footage and samples. The pace of discovery is slow not because the secrets are few, but because the ocean is vast beyond comprehension. Every secret revealed comes at the cost of immense effort, and for each one uncovered, countless more remain. The Midnight Zone also hides secrets we may never fully grasp, because of the fragility of its inhabitants. Many creatures collapse or dissolve when brought to the surface, their bodies unable to withstand the change in pressure. Some are so transparent or delicate that nets cannot capture them intact. Cameras give us fleeting glimpses, but the full reality of these animals remains hidden in the black beyond our ability to study directly. Their existence is known, but their essence remains secret. There are secrets too in the history written in sediments. Each layer of the seafloor records a story of climate shifts, volcanic eruptions, even human influence. But these layers are kilometres deep, accessible only through cores drilled at great cost. They contain records of Earth stretching back millions of years, stories of ancient oceans, extinctions and recoveries. The Midnight Zone is not just a habitat for living creatures. It is a library of geological and biological memory, most of which we have never read. What makes these hidden secrets compelling is not only that they are unknown, but that they are possible. Every discovery so far suggests that what remains unseen is just as extraordinary, if not more so, than what has been revealed. The idea that there are still animals as yet undescribed, behaviours never filmed, ecosystems undiscovered, makes the Midnight Zone a place where mystery is not just a relic of the past, but an ongoing reality. Unlike so many other parts of our planet that have been charted and measured, the abyss resists closure. It remains open, full of unanswered questions, and there is one more secret, one that lingers in the imagination. The possibility that life in the Midnight Zone may hold clues to life beyond Earth. If organisms can thrive here without sunlight, living on chemical energy and surviving pressure and darkness, then the same might be true on icy moons like Europa or Enceladus. What is hidden in our own ocean may be a preview of what exists elsewhere. The secrets of the midnight zone may not only reshape our view of Earth, but of the universe itself. To move through this place, even in thought, is to move among mysteries. Every shape in the dark may be a new species, every sound may be an unknown call, every glimmer of light may be a signal we cannot yet read. The midnight zone is not empty. It is filled with secrets, still hidden, still waiting, still reminding us that the greatest mysteries of life are not always distant stars, but the black waters that cover our own world. When we imagine drifting in the midnight zone, surrounded by blackness so absolute that even the memory of sunlight feels distant, there comes a point when the mind itself begins to shift. The creatures of the deep exist in ways that challenge our assumptions, and simply thinking about them forces us to reflect on what life really is, what survival means, and how small our own patterns of living appear in comparison. Reflections in the dark are not only about the animals themselves, but about what they reveal about us. The first reflection comes from the sheer persistence of life. For centuries, humans assumed the deep ocean was empty, too cold, too pressured, too dark to sustain anything. That belief was logical from our perspective, rooted in the assumption that life must be like us, dependent on sunlight, air, warmth. But the abyss shows us that life is broader, more flexible, more inventive. The fact that entire ecosystems flourish without the sun forces us to question how narrow our imagination has been. It reveals that what we take as universal may only be local. Our kind of survival is one option. There are countless others. The second reflection comes from the balance between fragility and resilience. Many creatures of the deep look delicate, bodies made of gelatin, transparent, easily destroyed if handled, and yet those same creatures endure pressures that would crush us instantly. Their fragility is not weakness, it is adaptation. They survive not by resisting the environment, but by becoming part of it, by yielding where we would break. It is a lesson in a different kind of strength, one that does not fight, but flows. The third reflection is about patience. Life in the midnight zone unfolds slowly. Predators wait motionless for hours or days. Growth happens over decades. Reproduction is rare, timed carefully to maximize survival. Compared to our constant rush, our need for speed, this slowness feels alien. Yet it is effective. It suggests that survival does not require urgency, that sometimes the most successful strategy is stillness, endurance, and the ability to wait. It challenges our belief that progress always means movement, that speed always equals success. There's also reflection in the creativity of adaptation. Bioluminescence is not only a curiosity, but a reminder that life invents new tools when old ones fail. In the absence of sunlight, animals made their own. Invisibility, transparency, gigantism, patience. These are not random quirks. They are deliberate solutions shaped by time and pressure. To reflect on them is to recognize that life is not only persistent, but endlessly resourceful, finding ways to thrive even when conditions seem impossible. Humans looking into the abyss often describe it as alien, but the reflection that emerges is that we are the strange ones. The majority of Earth's biosphere exists in darkness under pressure. We are the minority, living on a thin skin of land and surface waters. To see ourselves as normal is to ignore scale. The abyss is the real standard, and our world of sunlight is the exception. This realization shifts perspective, forcing us to see our lives not as the centre of nature but as one small version among many. There are reflections too about fear. For centuries we fill the deep with monsters, because fear thrives where vision fails. Even now, the imagery of the abyss often emphasizes teeth, jaws, shadows. But the reality is subtler. Most creatures of the deep are not hunters of humans. They are small, efficient and strange in ways that do not threaten us. The monsters we imagined say more about us than about them. They reveal our tendency to project danger onto the unknown, to turn mystery into menace. Reflecting on this reminds us that fear is often misplaced, that what we dread in the dark is usually not as terrifying as we expect. The midnight zone also reflects our desire for meaning. We see glowing patterns and imagine language. We see strange shapes and imagine stories. We cannot help but interpret. That instinct reveals something about us, that we seek connection even with creatures that share nothing of our senses or culture. Our reflections in the dark are not only about the ocean, they're about our need to understand, to build bridges of meaning, even where communication seems impossible. Another reflection is about humility. The abyss is so vast, so unexplored, that no matter how advanced our technology becomes, there will always be more unknown than known. Each discovery is not an ending, but an opening. The deep reminds us that mystery still exists, that the world is not fully mapped, that wonder is not exhausted. This humility is not defeat. It is a kind of wisdom, a reminder that our knowledge is always partial, that the earth still holds more than we can grasp. There are also personal reflections that arise when people encounter the abyss directly. Submersible pilots describe feelings of insignificance, of awe, of perspective that shifts permanently. Some compare it to looking at stars from space. Both experiences confront us with scale, with environments that dwarf human presence. The abyss reflects back our smallness, but it also reflects our curiosity, our ability to reach into places we were never meant to enter. It shows us both our limits and our drive to push past them. On a broader scale, the abyss reflects how connected everything is. The marine snow that feeds the deep comes from the surface. The migrations that rise and fall link shallow waters with black depths. The whales that dive carry nutrients between worlds. Even the climate is tied to these movements, carbon drawn downward into the dark. Reflecting on this reminds us that nothing is isolated. The abyss may feel separate, but it shapes the world above in ways we depend on. Its hidden cycles are part of the stability of our lives, whether we notice them or not. The dark also reflects our future. As we begin to explore the possibility of life beyond Earth, we use the abyss as a model. Moons like Europa and Enceladus may hold oceans beneath their ice, places without sunlight but rich in chemical energy. If life can thrive in the midnight zone, it may thrive there too. In this sense, the abyss reflects not only our past fears but our future hopes. It becomes a mirror for questions larger than Earth, questions about whether life is rare or universal. Finally, the abyss reflects beauty. Not beauty in the way we usually think of it, with colours and landscapes shaped by sunlight, but beauty in function, in adaptation, in survival itself. A jelly drifting with perfect efficiency, a siphonophore glowing in coordinated pulses, a fish vanishing into transparency. These are not only scientific curiosities, they are expressions of the same creativity that fills forests and skies. The dark reflects back a different version of beauty, one that does not depend on our senses but exists in its own right. To sit with these reflections is to realise that the midnight zone is not only a habitat but also a mirror. It shows us persistence, fragility, patience, creativity, humility, fear, meaning, connection, and beauty. It reveals truths about life that go beyond the ocean. The darkness here is not only an environment, it is a surface where our own questions and assumptions are cast back at us, changed by scale and silence. And in drifting deeper into it, we are not only exploring the ocean, we are exploring ourselves. Thank you for staying with me all this way. We've travelled together into the midnight zone, through its shadows, its creatures, its mysteries, and its echoes. Now, as we settle into the closing moments of this descent, let's allow the darkness itself to become a kind of resting place, a reminder that even in the deepest waters there is calm, a space where reflection can linger as gently as the drift of marine snow. The ocean beneath the waves has always been a paradox for us. It is both frightening and comforting, alien yet familiar, distant and yet part of our own world. Spending time imagining its black waters reshapes how we think not only about nature, but also about our own lives. The creatures we've met here live without sunlight, without clocks, without the certainty of abundance, and yet they endure. They have built their existence out of patience, resilience, and quiet adaptation. That endurance itself becomes a lesson, a kind of comfort. When you think of the Midnight Zone now, perhaps it no longer feels like a place of emptiness. Perhaps it feels alive, filled with slow rhythms and careful movements, a world not hostile but exacting, demanding that everything within it becomes what it needs to be. And in that demand there is a kind of peace. To survive here is to give in, to stop fighting what cannot be controlled, to drift with the currents instead of resisting them. It is a reminder that strength does not always look like force. Sometimes it looks like acceptance. The blackness here is not silent, and yet it is not loud. It is full of signals, of whispers in light and sound, of delicate patterns of communication that we can barely interpret. For the animals of the abyss, those flashes and vibrations are enough. For us, they become metaphors, reminders that connection can take countless forms, that meaning does not always have to be spoken to be real. To rest here in imagination is to feel surrounded, not by isolation but by presence. And the scale of it all, stretching across most of the planet, covering mountains, plains and trenches deeper than Everest is tall, puts our own worries into perspective. Life in the Midnight Zone does not rush. It does not measure itself by hours or days. It stretches across centuries in some cases, slow, enduring, steady. To carry that image with you is to carry a reminder that not everything must move quickly, that stillness and patience can be forms of progress too. If you've stayed with me through this descent, you've also seen how our imagination has always been tied to the deep. Sailors feared monsters in the black. Writers filled their stories with creatures beyond belief. Scientists discovered truths stranger than myths. And through it all, we have never stopped projecting our hopes and fears into this dark place. The abyss is not only part of Earth's biology, it is part of our minds, a canvas where we paint wonder, dread, curiosity and longing. Reflecting on it is as much about us as it is about the sea. So as we let the descent settle, think of the ocean not only as a space of mystery, but as a space of rest. Beneath the waves, where pressure is immense and light cannot reach, life has created its own calm. Drifters float in silence, giants move slowly, invisible beings vanish into nothingness, and predators wait with patience instead of frenzy. Everything here speaks of energy used wisely, of existence pared down to essentials. In that way, the Midnight Zone is not just a habitat, it is a philosophy. It shows us what it means to endure by doing only what matters most. Perhaps, as you listen, you feel some of that calm yourself. The ocean's darkness does not rush you. It does not demand answers. It simply continues, indifferent to clocks, unbothered by urgency. In its stillness, you can rest as well. The same patience that defines its creatures can extend to you, allowing a pause in a world that rarely offers pauses. The waves above may be turbulent, but down here, everything is slow, steady, unhurried. Rest beneath the waves is not about sleep alone. It is about perspective, about letting go of what feels overwhelming, about remembering that the largest part of our planet thrives in silence and darkness, without struggle against the uncontrollable. When you imagine yourself drifting here, weightless, surrounded by bioluminescent sparks and endless water. You can feel some of that perspective. You can let the depth itself carry you, as countless wanderers let the currents carry them. If you find this soothing, if the descent has brought you comfort or sparked your curiosity, you can linger with me again. Subscribing, liking, sharing. These are ways to return, ways to keep the journey alive, ways to remind the platform that stories of the deep still matter to you. And when you come back, there will be more waiting, because the ocean never runs out of mysteries to share. But for now, let the descent rest here. Let the ocean close around us, not as a wall but as a blanket, soft and endless. Let the images of glowing fish, drifting jellies, patient hunters, and invisible beings remain in your thoughts like fading sparks. Let yourself drift with them, carried by the same slow currents, at peace in the same dark expanse. The midnight zone has shown us survival, beauty, mystery, and reflection. Now it shows us rest. Beneath the waves, far from sunlight, there is a world that has endured for millions of years without us, and it will continue, whether we watch or not. That constancy is a comfort. That endurance is a lullaby. So let yourself rest too, held in the same stillness, carried by the same black waters. The ocean is vast, the mysteries endless, the dark complete, and in that completeness there is room for calm, for breath, for sleep.